Chapter 547. As a young god celestial master expert, Qingqiu's attack speed was extremely fast. After receiving the high priest's order, her body shook and instantly appeared in front of me. Her hands turned into a pair of fox claws that glowed with a cold light. It was different from the techniques that the Qingqiu foxes had used before. Qingqiu's clan leader didn't seem to need to use any techniques at all. She only relied on brute force to kill me. In actual fact, she did have such an ability. Before the fox claws reached me, I felt a cold aura lock my entire body. I tried to use it, but even the true yuan in my body was completely suppressed. I couldn't use it at all. My body was locked on the spot, unable to move. I could only wait for death. This was the young god celestial master's complete suppression on me. In front of absolute power, regardless of whether it was my dual witchcraft cultivation or my forward celestial master seal, none of them were of any use. I could only watch as her fox claws left afterimages as she clawed at my head. However, it was a pity that with the fat man around, no matter how high her cultivation was, it was futile. The fat man and I had researched the effects of the monster refining gourd. It was hard to say if it was used against a human young god celestial master, but against a monster, even if their cultivation surpassed the young god celestial master, they wouldn't be able to escape from the monster refining gourd. The gourd was called the monster refining gourd. It was the natural nemesis of all monsters. Although Qingqiu's clan leader's cultivation was high, it was nothing in front of the ancient divine weapon. Just as her fox claws were about to claw at my head, a gust of wind surged from behind me. Qingqiu's clan leader's hand movements instantly stopped. Then, without any resistance, her body tumbled backwards with the gust of wind and instantly disappeared. After her figure completely disappeared, I turned to look at the high priest in the black robe. Ever since I'd first met the high priest in the black robe, his face hadn't revealed any expression. His eyes were empty and emotionless. However, at this moment, his face was filled with shock and his entire body was trembling. His gaze was fixed on the monster refining gourd in the fat man's hand. He was obviously shocked. At this moment, I didn't know how dangerous Yao Yao's situation was. I didn't care about anything else and grabbed his black robe. "Where is Yao Yao? Where is she?" The black-robed high priest ignored me. His body was still visibly trembling, but he suddenly turned around and knelt down in front of the Fox King's statue. I couldn't tell what he was mumbling, but he seemed to be extremely agitated. At first, I thought that he was using some kind of secret technique, so I cautiously took 2 steps back. However, I quickly discovered that there wasn't any energy fluctuation coming from his body. On the contrary, as he chanted, large drops of tears flowed out of his eyes. His old face didn't have any fear or anger, but was instead filled with excitement and agitation. I couldn't hold back my impatience as I watched him kowtow in front of the statue. I grabbed his black robe and asked, "Where is Yao Yao? Tell me. Otherwise, you can meet Chief Qingqiu in the Demon Purification Gourd." Demon Purification Gourd. He didn't mention Yao Yao but muttered the Demon Purification Gourd. He looked even more excited as he muttered, "Demon Purification Gourd. It really is the Demon Purification Gourd. The Demon Purification Gourd has appeared, and the god's servant has descended." Fox King. Fox King. I didn't know what he was mumbling. I was already anxious, so I naturally didn't care about his nonsense. I roared at him again, "Where is Yao Yao?" This time, he seemed to be more clear-headed after hearing my roar. The maniacal smile on his face disappeared and was replaced with endless longing. He lowered his head as though he didn't dare to look at me. He pointed at the statue and whispered, "She's in the altar over there." The Fox King. Without waiting for him to finish, I let go of him and pushed him to the ground. As I ran towards the statue, I said to the fatty, "Fatty, subdue him." When I reached the statue, I lowered my head and scanned around. Soon after, I saw a shallow hole on the ground next to the statue's hairy right foot. There was an unknown liquid in the hole that was fuming white smoke. Inside the smoke, I saw a snow-white fox that wasn't even 1 meter long. It was soaking in that hole. At first glance, I glanced at the little fox. When I turned my head and looked at her again, I suddenly remembered that Yao Yao was also from the Qingqiu fox tribe. Could this little fox be her? With that thought, I hastily jumped over. I didn't dare to touch the unknown liquid in the puddle. I used my true yuan to wrap around the little fox's body and took her out of the liquid, bringing her in front of me. The little fox was unconscious. Her snow-white fur had become sticky from being soaked in the water. I extended my hand and pressed a few times on her neck and chest. I could feel the warmth in her body and her beating heart. This proved that the little fox's life wasn't in danger for the time being. However, I couldn't tell if it was Yao Yao from the fox's fur. Just as I was hesitating if I should continue searching, the fatty walked over. Seeing the little fox on the ground in front of me, he was shocked. He hastily asked, "What happened to Yao Yao? This is Yao Yao? You can recognize her?" I quickly asked the fatty. The fatty nodded affirmatively. "I can sense her soul aura. This is Yao Yao." After he confirmed it, I heaved a sigh of relief. It was good that Yao Yao was fine. Fortunately, the fatty's monster refining gourd was here. Otherwise, if I sent Yao Yao back to the Qingqiu tribe and killed her, I wouldn't know how to explain this to Yao Yao's mother. After confirming her identity, I hastily sat down and extended my hand to press on the little fox's chest. I slowly sent my Tao energy and true yuan into her body. Since I wasn't sure of Yao Yao's current condition, I didn't dare to act rashly. I carefully searched for her meridians and sent a weak Tao energy and true yuan into her meridians. I guided the monstrous energy in her body and slowly circulated it. The Tao energy was gentle and could even fuse with the monstrous energy. No matter what caused Yao Yao's current condition, I just needed to guide the monstrous energy in her body to circulate a few times to help her recover. Her body's condition would naturally improve. Since her cultivation was only at glory of knowledge, her body was currently weak. The monstrous energy in her meridians might not even be at the dragon-seeking realm. In comparison, my Tao energy was too vast. I could only use a small portion to help her. I also had to be careful and slow to prevent harming her weak meridians. After one circulation, the tip of my nose was covered in sweat. After a few more cycles, my entire body was drenched in sweat. I was even more tired than if I had fought a few battles on my own. Fortunately, my efforts weren't in vain. After a few cycles, I retracted my Tao energy and true yuan. I extended my hand to sense Yao Yao's body. Her breathing had completely returned to normal, and her heartbeat was much stronger. It was obvious that her body had recovered. However, she was still unconscious and hadn't woken up yet. I didn't forcefully wake her up. Instead, I found 2 praying mats that were used to kneel in front of the god's statue and put them together. I carefully placed the little fox on top of them so that she could rest. After I was done, I turned around to take a look. Currently, there were only the 2 of us in the Fox King Palace's Divine Hall. At the entrance of the Divine Hall in the distance, there seemed to be quite a number of people from the Green Hill tribe gathered there. However, the strange thing was that it had been a long time since we had barged in, but none of them had come in. Although I didn't understand the reason, it would have been troublesome for them to come in. It was good that they hadn't come in. I found a praying mat and sat down. I asked the fatty, "Let the black-robed high priest out. I'll ask him what's going on." The fatty nodded and swung the devil refining gourd in his hand. The black-robed high priest's figure reappeared and sat down in front of us. This old fox had entered the devil refining gourd, but his expression didn't change at all. He was still excited and respectful. The moment he came out, he lifted his head to look at the fatty and me. Then, he immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed. His actions confused us. Although he was currently under my control, with his identity and cultivation, even if he was begging for mercy, he shouldn't be acting so shamelessly. Moreover, from his expression, the respect and sincerity on his face didn't seem to be fake at all. After stopping him from kowtowing, I asked, "What did you say just now? Also, why are you kowtowing to the two of us?" The black-robed high priest kowtowed again. Then, he stared at the ground and replied respectfully, "When the devil refining gourd appears, the god's servant descends." This is an ancient teaching left behind by the ancestors of the Green Hill tribe. The devil refining gourd refers to the devil refining gourd. This means that when the devil refining gourd reappears in the world, the Fox King's God's servant will descend. The two of you have brought the devil refining gourd to the Green Hill tribe. You must be the God's messengers sent by the Fox King to convey the Fox King's message. I had eyes but failed to recognize you. Please forgive me, God's messenger. After saying that, he began to kowtow again. Chapter 548. I more or less understood my identity, or rather my identity in my previous life. Nan Gong had told me about his experience in the Yinshang royal tomb and hinted at many things. According to the god statue in the Fox King Palace, it was possible to say that I was the Fox King, but God's servant. It was obvious that the old fox had some misunderstanding. I naturally didn't need to tell him that. I thought for a while and changed the topic. I pointed at the little fox that was still unconscious on the praying mat and asked the high priest, "What's going on with Yao Yao? Why must you use the Tushan fox as a sacrifice to the Fox King?" After a series of questions, the black-cloaked high priest seemed to be in a daze. After staying silent for a while, he looked at me and answered, "The Tushan fox as a sacrifice to the Fox King is the tradition of the Qingqiu tribe. In ancient times, the Tushan family's daughter betrayed the monster race. After marrying Yu the Great, they joined hands to exterminate the monster race. At that time, there weren't many survivors of the monster race. After that calamity, the entire race was almost wiped out. Until now, the Tushan fox has become a synonym for betrayal in the monster race. As for using the Tushan fox as a sacrifice to the Fox King, it's because the Tushan fox has a special innate skill. After it is sacrificed to the Fox King can use its innate skill to transmit information." His words were very messy. After thinking for a while, I finally understood what he meant. I was confused and asked, "Could it be that the Fox King is still alive? If he's still alive, why does he need to use the sacrificial method to transmit information? Also, with the innate skill of the Tushan fox, the Fox King can use it after it is sacrificed. It sounds too unbelievable." After hearing my question, the black-cloaked high priest looked at me strangely. He didn't reply and instead asked, "The Fox King is naturally still alive. Otherwise, why would he send the god's envoy?" I currently controlled absolute power, so I didn't need to feign civility with him. I shook my head and denied the fatty and eyes God's envoys and said, "The two of us aren't God's servants. Our trip here has nothing to do with the Fox King. We're just escorting Yao Yao and trying to obtain the 7-star mugwort." Although I rejected him, the black-cloaked high priest didn't agree. He smiled and shook his head. "It seems that the god's envoy hasn't awakened and doesn't know his identity. It doesn't matter. One day, the god's envoy will realize it." I didn't want to argue with him, so I just shook my head. The priest continued, "Fox King's power is beyond our imagination. At first, sacrificing Tushan foxes was only a punishment for Tushan fox's betrayal. Later on, we accidentally received the message from Fox King. That was how Qingqiu clan inherited it, and it has been passed down generation after generation for thousands of years. As for how the Fox King made use of Tushan's special talent, I don't know. The cunning old fox looked very honest. It could be said that he didn't hide anything from me. However, he didn't answer my question clearly. After he finished speaking, an image appeared in my mind. That was the scene when I entered the illusion in the Yinshang Royal Mausoleum. Back then, I was sitting in a temple, and countless people were worshipping me. There were even many people holding children of 7 or 8 years old, offering them to me. I picked up these children and stuffed them into my mouth, as if they were living people's food. If that illusion was real, I would be a man-eating beast. Comparing the ritual that happened in the dreamland to the Qingqiu clan, the priest in the black robe offered Tushan Fox to the Fox King. If the Fox King could swallow Tushan Fox and borrow the power of the Fox King, it wasn't hard to understand. I turned to look at Yao Yao and asked again, "What is that puddle of liquid? Why is Yao Yao still in a coma?" The black-cloaked high priest shook his head. "I don't know. That puddle of liquid is Fox King's power. Every time Tushan Foxes need to be worshipped, that puddle of liquid will appear in front of the statue of Fox King. We will follow the instruction and put Tushan Foxes into that puddle of liquid. After putting them in, Tushan Foxes will pass out." "I don't know why." I frowned. At first, Yao Yao's breathing was smooth and it didn't look serious. I didn't pay much attention to it, as I thought she would get better after resting for a while. However, according to the black-cloaked high priest, that puddle of liquid wasn't simple. Yao Yao's situation might be much more complicated than I had imagined. However, before I could think further, the black-cloaked high priest showed a confused face. He looked at Yao Yao, who was sleeping soundly not far from me, and frowned. "I've been a high priest for over 100 years. Every time I offer Tushan Foxes to Fox King, after the ritual, the puddle of liquid and Tushan Foxes will disappear. Why is she still here this time?" "Disappear?" I recalled what had happened earlier. Instinctively, I asked, "Did you not finish the ritual?" The black-cloaked high priest shook his head. "Impossible. Worshipping Fox King is the most important thing in our clan. I'm a high priest for this. Just now, when you two barged in, because the ritual wasn't finished yet, I didn't pay attention to you. Until the ritual was finished, I started to talk to you too." After explaining, he didn't wait for me to reply. He seemed to have made up his mind and said to me, "Although I don't know why, Fox King definitely needs Tushan Foxes. We can't waste any more time. We have to put Tushan Foxes back into that puddle of liquid and start the ritual again." After said, he lifted his leg to walk toward Yao Yao. I was startled and hurried to stop him. With a strange face, I said to him, "I came back in a hurry to save Yao Yao. Do you think I will let you sacrifice her again?" The priest in black didn't answer my question. Instead, he tried to persuade me. He told me that sacrificing Tushan Fox was very important to the Fox King, and that I didn't know who I was yet. If I tried to stop him, I would regret it when I found out who I was. There was no need to argue with a fanatic like him. I didn't pay attention to his words. After thinking for a while, I asked a very important question. "You said that the Fox King still exists in this world. Do you know where the Fox King is?" If this nine-tailed Fox King was the same person I had seen in the Yinshang Royal Mausoleum, then that person was most likely my previous incarnation. It was impossible for my previous incarnation and my current incarnation to appear at the same time. Since I was here, my previous incarnation must have disappeared. This contradicted what the black-cloaked high priest said about Fox King still existing in this world. That's why I asked this question. The black-cloaked high priest was silent for a while before answering. In ancient times, when Fox King was conquering the human world, he was plotted against. The entire monster race was trapped in the mountain and sea realm, and they still haven't escaped. Naturally, Fox King is there. I frowned. The mountain and sea realm? When Nangong gave me the Xinyuan sword, he had said the same thing. According to him, in the mountain and sea realm, Shenong had transformed into a dense fog and sealed the world wall, trapping the monster race. But later, Monster Emperor Jun had borrowed the bloodline of Shenong's daughter and escaped alone. He had killed Xinyuan and then perished together with Gao Exin. I had thought that Monster Emperor Jun and Gao Xin were my previous incarnations, so I had equated this Fox King with Monster Emperor June. But the black-robed High Priest's words seemed to contradict. Could it be that Fox King and Monster Emperor June weren't the same person? I asked the black-cloaked High Priest. When Fox King conquered the human world, did he lead the Fox race or the Monster race? He told me with certainty that Fox King led the entire Monster race. He wasn't just the king of the nine-tailed High Priest, but the king of the entire Monster race. He was known as the Monster Emperor. Demon Tharch. This was almost equivalent to Demon Tharchi. I thought about it for a moment, then asked him, if the entire monster race had been trapped in the mountain and sea realm, then why is the nine-tailed High Priest still alive? The Green Hill clan hadn't left the mountain and sea realm. Some of them had remained in the nine-tailed High Priest's country. The current nine-tailed High Priest was the descendant of the remnants of the original tribe. Combining all the information he had provided me, the only reasonable explanation was that the nine-tailed High Priest didn't know what had happened after the monster race was trapped in the mountain and sea realm. They believed that Monster Emperor June had led the entire monster race and was still in the mountain and sea realm. Chapter 549. Seeing that Yao Yao had woken up, I didn't bother about the priest and quickly turned to Yao Yao's side. I squatted down and rubbed the white fur on the little fox's head. I asked softly, Yao Yao, how are you feeling? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Yao Yao was still in her fox form. Although we were familiar with each other, I had never talked to a little fox like that before. I felt slightly awkward. Yao Yao's gaze was still a little dazed. She lifted her head weakly and looked at me for a while before she seemed to understand something. She didn't make a sound and buried her head into the praying mat. She even used her two meaty paws to hug her head. I was stunned and thought that something had happened to her. However, I immediately came back to my senses. This little fellow seemed to be shy. As expected, Yao Yao's delicate voice spread out. I'm fine. Big Brother Zhou, can you bring my clothes over so that I can turn back into my human form? Hearing her say that, I couldn't help but be curious. I thought that the fox race would turn their fur into clothes when they turned into humans. I didn't expect that they would have to find their own clothes to wear. Since that was the case, I couldn't blame Yao Yao for being shy. She had lived in the human world since young and had cultivated to the realm of knowledge transformation. She was used to clothes. Although she was in her fox form, it was no different from being naked to her. I turned to ask the priest where Yao Yao's clothes were. Although the priest insisted on sacrificing Yao Yao, he knew that he wouldn't be able to change my mind. After staying silent for a while, he sighed and didn't say anything. He stood up and went to look for Yao Yao's clothes. While waiting for him to return, I asked Yao Yao about the fox race's transformation and clothing. Although Yao Yao was shy, she still told me that after the fox race reached the Sky-Shire realm, they could refine their own fur and turn it into something similar to a magical artifact. When they transformed, they could directly turn it into clothing, so they wouldn't have to worry about this problem anymore. Currently, she was still a step away from the Sky-Shire realm, so she didn't have this ability. After chatting for a while, the priest came back with Yao Yao's clothes. Yao Yao struggled to get up. She wanted to find a place to hide from people and transform. However, since her body was weak, she staggered when she stood up. I felt sorry for her, so I picked her up and brought her to the back of the statue. After putting her clothes and shoes in a safe place, I left the statue. Not long after, Yao Yao put on her clothes and walked out. Her complexion and gait were much better than before. I let her sit on the praying mat and asked her about her body's condition. After knowing that she had consumed too much of her monster power, I felt relieved. I let her sit there and cultivate by herself for a while to recover her monster power first. Since Yao Yao was fine, my hatred towards the Qingqiu clan had dissipated a lot. Moreover, the priest's attitude towards me and the fatty had been very respectful. I couldn't do anything else. After thinking for a while, I told the priest that I had come here to ask for the 7-star mugwort. Since I had already obtained it, I couldn't stay here any longer. As for Yao Yao, after what had happened, I couldn't let her stay here. I decided to take her away and go to Hong Kong to send her to her parents' side. Although Yao Yao's mother was worried that Yao Yao wouldn't be safe with her by her side, she begged me to send Yao Yao here. However, in this situation, I could only choose the lesser of two evils. I made my decision. Although the priest wasn't happy, he couldn't do anything about it. He sighed and nodded, not saying anything. After that, I asked the fatty to release the Qinqiu clan leader. As soon as he came out, the hot-tempered Qinqiu clan leader wanted to attack me again. However, the priest stopped her. After introducing us, the Qinqiu clan leader's beautiful face was filled with disbelief. However, it didn't matter if she believed it or not. The priest's position in the Qinqiu clan was much higher than hers, so she couldn't do anything about it. After dealing with these matters, I couldn't wake Yao Yao up because she was still cultivating. I could only sit cross-legged and wait for her to wake up. Just like that, an entire day passed. During this time, Chief Qingqiu and the black-robed priest called people over to clean up the temple. They even sent food to the fatty and me. Their attitude was very respectful, and we got along well with each other. At noon on the second day, Yao Yao, who was sitting cross-legged on the praying mat, suddenly opened her eyes. Seeing that she had woken up, I wanted to greet her. However, before I could open my mouth, an indescribable aura suddenly rose from Yao Yao's body. Immediately after, a white light flashed and her clothes fell to the ground. Her body returned to her fox form. At the same time, there was a faint sound of thunder in the sky above the temple. I immediately stopped talking and my expression changed. Logically speaking, after Yao Yao cultivated for a day, her body should have completely recovered after her body was filled with monster power. Why did such a change happen? Before I could understand what was going on, Chief Qingqiu and the black-clothed priest, who were standing behind me, simultaneously exclaimed, "Monster King Tribulation! Monster King Tribulation?" I didn't react at first, but I quickly realized that Monster King was the monster race's heaven's master realm. Monster King Tribulation. Was Yao Yao about to advance to heaven's master realm? Thinking about it, the sound of thunder seemed to be similar to the 3 lightning strikes when I advanced to heaven's master realm. Yao Yao was really about to advance to Monster King. Although it was sudden, it was actually reasonable. Yao Yao was already in Glory of Knowledge realm, and she had obtained a breakthrough in the monster refining gourd. Her power was already at the complete stage of Glory of Knowledge. Compared to humans, the barrier to advance to heaven's master realm was much smaller. With Yao Yao's cultivation at that stage, advancing was just a matter of time. After coming back to my senses, I quickly sat cross-legged at the side to protect Yao Yao. At the same time, I instructed the fatty to be careful and hold the monster refining gourd in his hand. If anything happened, he had to react immediately. No matter if it was a monster or a human, advancing to heaven's master was a huge milestone on the path of cultivation. This matter couldn't be careless no matter what. After all, we were still in the Fox King Palace. I purposely instructed the fatty to use the monster refining gourd to intimidate the Qingqiu tribe leader and the black-robed priest so that they wouldn't take the opportunity to cause trouble. It was different from what I had imagined. Not only did the two of them not have the intention to cause trouble, they even ordered that no one from the Qingqiu tribe was allowed to enter the Fox King Palace without permission. The two of them followed me and sat cross-legged next to Yao Yao in an attempt to protect her. If the black-robed priest knew that he couldn't go against my wishes, and he respected the fatty and my status as god envoys, it wouldn't be strange for him to do something to please us. However, ever since the Qingqiu tribe leader had come out of the monster refining gourd, he had been indignant. Now that he was willing to protect Yao Yao, it was really strange. I turned and frowned at the two of them. The black-robed priest seemed to have noticed my confusion, and he said to me with a bitter expression, God Envoy, you don't have to be surprised. Although the Qingqiu tribe uses the Tushan girl as a sacrifice to the Fox King, there are two rules during the sacrifice. The first is that the sacrifice must be a virgin, and the second is that the sacrifice's cultivation cannot reach Monster King realm. Now that Yao Yao has advanced to Monster King, in my eyes, she is no longer a sacrifice, but a member of the Qingqiu tribe. There was actually such a rule. Although it sounded strange, it explained their actions. I thought back to when Yao Yao's mother had returned to the Qingqiu tribe. It was probably because of such a rule that she wasn't used as a sacrifice and escaped the calamity. I nodded in acknowledgement of what he had said. Even so, I kept my guard up and didn't ask the fatty to put away the monster refining gourd. No matter whether what they said was true or not, it was always better to be safe than sorry. The thunder above the temple hadn't stopped since it had appeared. It had already rumbled 3 times, but the monster race was different from humans after all. There was no such thing as 3 lightning strikes. I saw that Yao Yao's expression was still calm and she didn't interfere. After around 15 minutes, the thunder in the sky finally stopped. I heaved a sigh of relief as I thought that I had passed the first trial. I didn't expect that when the thunder stopped, countless lightning bolts suddenly appeared in the divine hall. They gathered from all directions and surged towards Yao Yao's body. The lightning contained strong lightning power. Although Yao Yao had the power of glory of knowledge, she definitely wouldn't be able to block it. Chapter 550. Lightning to refine the body? After listening to him, I didn't dare to act rashly. However, I wasn't sure if he was telling the truth or lying to me. While I was hesitating, the heavenly lightning moved extremely fast. Before I could make a decision, a white light flashed and touched Yao Yao's body. It was different from what I imagined when the lightning struck Yao Yao's body. When the lightning with white light touched Yao Yao's body, it suddenly disappeared and entered her body. After the heavenly lightning had entered her body, I observed Yao Yao's body and didn't find any injuries. However, Yao Yao's expression was one of pain. It was clear that the heavenly lightning that had entered her body hadn't disappeared, but was still affecting her. I was still nervous, but the heavenly lightning had already entered her body. Even if I tried to help, I didn't know how to help. I had no choice but to believe the black-robed priest's words and wait for Yao Yao to resist the heavenly lightning. Seeing that I wasn't going to interfere, the black-robed priest said to me, "Our monster race is different from your human race. Humans are blessed by the heavens. They are born with the ability to sense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, allowing them to use powerful magical technique. As for our monster race, we can't sense spiritual energy. Apart from the magical techniques passed down through our bloodlines, we can only cultivate our own bodies. Even if we can take human form and have a human body, the magical techniques we can cultivate are limited because of our innate defects. That's why when you advance to the heavenly master rank, you humans can condense your soul and create a seal. But our monster race can only borrow the power of heavenly lightning to refine our bodies. The difference between the two is more than 1,000 miles. This is also the reason why the Fox King entered the mountain and sea realm to steal the origin power. Unfortunately, he couldn't defy the will of the heavens. Although the Fox King obtained the origin power, he was trapped for 10,000 years. I didn't know if it was because old people liked to talk about the past. While talking about Yao Yao, the black-robed priest's topic shifted to the ancient Fox King. I wasn't in the mood to talk about ancient matters with him. I focused on Yao Yao. I asked the black-robed priest, "What are the success rates of your race when they advance to the Monster King rank? What happens if they fail?" The black-robed priest thought for a while and answered, "The monster race doesn't have enough soul power. Very few of them can communicate with heaven and earth and trigger heavenly lightning. However, if he could trigger the heavenly lightning, his chances of advancing to the Yao King stage would be very high. At the very least, he would have a 50% chance of succeeding. As for those who fail, most of them will be turned into ashes by the heavenly thunder. Those who survive will also be heavily injured and won't last more than a few days. According to what he said, on the path to becoming a heavenly master, the demon clan and the human clan were not much different. It was also difficult for the human clan to push open that door, but generally speaking, as long as they could push open that door, they would be able to successfully advance. However, the difference was that even if humans failed to advance, their cultivation would only decrease. In the worst-case scenario, they would have no hope of becoming a heavenly master for the rest of their lives. It was extremely rare for them to perish. From this point of view, the human race was indeed more favored than the demon race. I couldn't help but worry. The black-robed priest seemed to have noticed my worry, so he tried to comfort me. This process isn't that difficult. Plus, Yao Yao's innate talent is extraordinary. There is almost no possibility of failure. I shook my head and didn't say a word. He didn't know Yao Yao's background, but I did. According to the lifespan of the green hill foxes, Yao Yao was only a little girl who hadn't reached adulthood yet. Her cultivation time was too short, which meant that her foundation wasn't stable. Especially when it came to advancing from glory of consciousness realm to heavenly master realm, she had only used less than a year's time due to coincidence. I even suspected that she hadn't even stabilized her glory of consciousness realm yet. Even though I was anxious, I couldn't help her. Everything depended on Yao Yao's luck. According to Murphy's Law, things would always develop in a bad direction. That was indeed the case. After 15 minutes, the pained expression on Yao Yao's face didn't disappear. Instead, it became more intense. Even her body started to tremble. At the same time, electricity seeped out from her body and circulated on her white fur. Because of the electric light, Yao Yao's originally very fluffy hair, every strand of hair is standing up, bringing a kind of shocking beauty. Chief Qin Qiu, who hadn't spoken for a long time, suddenly shouted, "Heavenly thunder leakage." I abruptly turned my head and stared at her. I asked anxiously, "What does heavenly thunder leakage mean?" Chief Qin Qiu glanced at the black-robed priest but didn't speak. The black-robed priest continued, "The heavenly thunder leakage means that the power of the heavenly thunder has exceeded the limit that Yao Yao's body can endure. The heavenly thunder that seeped out won't refine her body but will only become violent and cause harm to her body. However, God's envoy, you don't have to worry too much. Normally speaking, when a monster advances, only a small portion of the heavenly thunder can be absorbed. The majority of the heavenly thunder will leak out. As long as the amount that leaked out isn't too much, it won't affect her too much." Even though he was comforting me, the black-robed priest's expression was obviously more solemn than before. I retracted my gaze and looked at him. After staying silent for a while, I asked, "What if a lot of the heavenly thunder is leaked out?" The black-robed priest kept silent for a while before replying, "The more it leaks out, the more harm it will cause to Yao Yao. Once she's unable to withstand it, her advancement will fail and she will be in danger." Actually, even if he didn't say it, I could roughly guess it in my heart. I had only asked because I wanted to confirm with him. The situation was already very dangerous. After thinking for a while, I asked again, "What if I help her clean up the leaking heavenly thunder? What will happen?" The black-robed priest shook his head. "Once there's an external force interfering, the heavenly thunder will become violent and uncontrollable, including the part of her body that is refining. The heavenly thunder in my body would become violent." I knew what the outcome would be even without the black-robed priest's explanation. I could only shake my head and reject the idea of saving Yao Yao at the crucial moment. Since I was at my wit's end, the only thing I could do was to pray. I prayed that Yao Yao would be able to survive this ordeal. The truth proved that praying was the most useless method. Just as I had such a thought, the lightning on Yao Yao's body suddenly increased. The bright white lightning was extremely dazzling on her white fur. When it first appeared, It looked like fleas shuttling through her fur and would only appear once in a while. But now, it had turned into countless tiny snakes of light that slithered around Yao Yao's body. Following a low groan of pain, a ghastly line of blood flowed out from the corner of Yao Yao's mouth. I clenched my fist tightly and took a step forward with my left leg. I almost couldn't control myself and wanted to make a move. However, the black-robed priest pulled my arm and said in a deep voice, "Yao Yao is barely able to resist at this moment. If you were to make a move, she would really be consigned to eternal damnation." The black-robed priest was right. After I calmed down, I looked at Yao Yao carefully. Although there was blood at the corner of her mouth and her body was trembling, she was still able to maintain her cross-legged posture. It was obvious that she was struggling to hold on. Although I didn't know how long she could hold on for, the situation wasn't at its most critical point yet. I took a deep breath and retracted the power of the footstep. I asked the black-robed priest, "The monster race has existed for tens of thousands of years. For the past tens of thousands of years, there have been countless monster kings. Do you have any way to deal with such a situation?" The black-robed priest shook his head. "Survival of the fittest. You humans also say that there are no shortcuts in the path of cultivation. This is a test from the heavens. You can only rely on yourself to hold on. There's no other way." He was right. Cultivation was a journey against the heavens. Cruelty was the essence. Although the living beings in the world could create various cultivation techniques, they couldn't change the essence of cultivation. Looking at Yao Yao's expression of struggling to hold on, my heart gradually turned cold. When her body started to tremble and blood started to seep out from the 7 apertures of her head, I couldn't help but close my eyes. However, at that moment, a bright light suddenly shot out from the divine hall. The light didn't come from the lightning on Yao Yao's body, but from the enormous god statue behind her. I raised my head suddenly and saw the source of the light. The right eye of the god statue was glowing brightly. The light came from the right pupil of the god statue. Chapter 551. Fox King's True Blood. It's actually the Fox King's true blood. Amidst the strange phenomenon, the black-robed priest suddenly exclaimed. I turned to ask him, "What's the Fox King's true blood?" It was a strange way of saying it. Not only did I not understand, but Chief Qingqiu also seemed to be confused. He turned to look at the priest in black suspiciously. The priest in black took a deep breath, but his gaze was still fixed on the floating golden liquid. He said, "Human race's talents vary from person to person. It's a gift from the heavens. The monster race has been passed down since ancient times. Talents only depend on the bloodline. If the body is filled with ancient bloodline, it means that one is gifted. If it's the other way around, it means that one is just a monster. This has been the case since ancient times. However, when I was reading through the records of my race, I came across some record. It was said that during ancient times, when the monster race was at its peak, there were monsters with high cultivation who saw that their descendants with a shallow bloodline had no hope of cultivating. Hence, they took the true blood from their bodies to increase their bloodline and increase their talent." As he spoke, the golden liquid landed on Yao Yao's body. The moment it came into contact with her body, it disappeared. I looked at Yao Yao carefully. She still looked like she was in pain. I wondered if the so-called Fox King's true blood was really effective. I asked the priest in black, "Is this so-called true blood the blood essence that human cultivators talk about?" The priest in black shook his head. "It's similar to blood essence. It's the essence that is gathered from the body's flesh and soul. The difference is that the monster race's true blood contains the aura of their own bloodline. Even a young god celestial master wouldn't be able to produce it. Those that can condense true blood are all monsters with high cultivation." He said it plainly, but I understood after thinking about it. Bloodline was different from flesh, blood, and soul. To humans, although flesh, blood, and soul were precious, they could be nourished by the body. Hence, at the Earth Master realm, one could easily condense their own true blood. On the other hand, bloodline represented time and the race's inheritance. It was similar to the biological definition of genes. Genes had almost reached the level of creating life. To cultivators, destroying life and creating life were two completely different levels. A toddler could kill mosquitoes and flies. Destroying life and creating life only existed in myths and legend. If the so-called true blood of the demon race was related to the bloodline, then it was no wonder that the black-robed priest said that his cultivation was heaven-defying. After he finished speaking, the Qingqiu clan leader hurriedly asked, "Then does the Qingqiu clan still have the true blood inheritance method?" The black-robed priest shook his head. The monster race was nearly wiped out 10,000 years ago. Ever since then, the remnants have lived on to this day. No great monster has been born, so how can there be any true blood inheritance? Taking a step back, in the past 10,000 years, the bloodline within the body of the demon clan has already been completely diluted, and it's difficult to find traces of the ancient bloodline. This is also the fundamental reason why my demon clan is gradually declining. If it weren't for the fact that ancient records have been preserved to this day, perhaps no one would even know of the term true blood. There was a hint of self-pity in his words, and clan leader Qingqiu sighed as well. However, very quickly, the black-robed priest became excited again and said, "But it's all good now. The Fox King has shown himself, and Yao Yao has obtained the Fox King's true blood. The bloodline of the Fox clan has been restored, and from now on, we will definitely rise again." The two of them lamented about the fate of the demon clan, but this wasn't a topic that I was concerned about. My gaze was fixed on Yao Yao, and her condition seemed to have improved slightly. There were still traces of blood on her 7 orifices, but they were no longer seeping out. Her body was much calmer now, and it was obvious that the electric light circulating around her had mostly dissipated. I didn't understand the relationship between the bloodline and the heavenly lightning's tempering, so I asked the black-robed priest again. He temporarily stopped thinking about the future of the Qingqiu Fox clan, and told me that when the heavenly lightning tempered the body, it was actually tempering the bloodline. If the bloodline was full, there would naturally be the protection of the power of inheritance, and they would be able to withstand the heavenly lightning. If the bloodline was thin, there would be no power of inheritance. No one would be able to resist the heavenly lightning with just their physical body. After his explanation, I finally understood, and I couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. The so-called Fox King's true blood contained an extremely thick bloodline power. After Yao Yao absorbed it, with the protection of the power of inheritance, it shouldn't be a problem for her to turn the situation around. That was indeed the case. While I was asking the black-robed priest, Yao Yao's condition was getting better. Her body had completely stopped trembling, and the heavenly lightning on the surface of her body had disappeared, returning to her body. However, the tempering process hadn't been completed, and she was still lying there, unconscious. The only strange thing was that the golden liquid had already entered Yao Yao's body, but the golden light in the statue's right pupil hadn't disappeared, and it was still shining on Yao Yao's body. Since Yao Yao was fine, I turned my attention to the statue and stared at it carefully. When I had first seen the statue, I had only noticed that it was half human, half beast, and looked similar to me in the illusion, but I hadn't been able to see its appearance clearly. However, when I got closer, I could clearly see that the statue's appearance was exactly the same as me in the illusion. However, at this moment, under the contrast of the golden light in the statue's right pupil, the statue seemed to have changed. Its appearance hadn't changed, but its aura had changed. At this moment, the statue was entirely golden, as though it was a god that was emitting boundless golden light. It made people unable to feel that it was half human, half beast. If one looked at it for a long time, they might even have the urge to kneel and worship it. Perhaps it was just as the black-robed priest had said, the Fox King had manifested his spirit. At this moment, the statue wasn't a clay doll, but the real Fox King. After thinking about this, my heart suddenly shivered. Previously, all my guesses had proven that the Fox King was Monster Emperor June, and Monster Emperor June was one of my previous incarnations. If the Fox King was really manifesting his spirit, wouldn't I be seeing my previous incarnation right in front of Monster Emperor June? However, the previous incarnation and the current incarnation were two opposite terms, just like a soul and a ghost. The living was the soul, while the dead was the ghost. How could the two appear at the same time? When I first realized this problem, I had thought that the black-robed priest didn't know the truth of the past. However, this time, the Fox King had manifested his spirit in front of me. How could I explain this? I couldn't understand this problem. At this moment, Yao Yao's body trembled and she opened her eyes. I couldn't be bothered to think further as I prepared to walk over to check on her condition. However, the black-robed priest extended his hand to pull me back like before. He said, "Although Yao Yao has woken up, she is still one step away from becoming a Monster King. God Envoy, please don't be impatient." After saying that, he couldn't be bothered with me anymore. Together with Chief Qin Qiu, he stared at Yao Yao with a burning gaze, as though he was anticipating something. Yao Yao's danger just now made me forget that she was still in the process of becoming a Heaven's Master. The black-robed priest was right. Yao Yao had yet to reveal her Heaven's Master aura, so it was obvious that she hadn't completed her advancement. Yao Yao's eyes were a little dazed when she opened them. After a short while, her pupils suddenly shone with seven-colored light. The seven-colored light was like a gas. After it appeared, it continuously increased in size. Very quickly, it overflowed Yao Yao's eye sockets and spread to her head, before covering her entire body. Witnessing this scene, the black-robed priest and Chief Qin Qiu were delighted. Chief Qin Qiu even cheered out loud. I didn't understand what he meant. After asking him, I understood that when the monster race advanced to become a Monster King, apart from refining their physical body, they had to refine their soul as well. This was similar to humans. The seven-colored light that overflowed from Yao Yao's eyes was a representation of her soul. The more seven-colored light there was, the stronger the refinement of her soul was. The stronger the soul, the higher her innate talent in cultivating spells would be. Although the monster race had a strong physical body, there was a limit to the strength of their physical body. The reason why they could transform was so that they could cultivate their soul and cultivate spells like humans. After reaching the Heaven's Master realm, all the paths would return to the same origin. Regardless of whether it was a human or a monster, they would have to cultivate their soul to the extreme before they could find a chance to transcend the mortal world and be reborn. Hence, Yao Yao's overflowing seven-colored light that engulfed her entire body meant that she would be able to walk further on the path of cultivation. That was why the black-robed priest and Chief Qin Qiu were delighted. After understanding it, I didn't feel anything. They didn't understand Yao Yao, but I did. Yao Yao was just a weak little girl. She had lived in the human world since she was young. She didn't even have a sense of belonging to the Qin Qiu tribe, not to mention the great ambition of supporting the tribe's glory. She probably never thought about it. Now that she had coincidentally gotten what she wanted, it might not be what she wanted. As I was thinking, the light that covered Yao Yao's body retracted back into her eyes. Her gaze became clear again. At the same time, an aura that belonged to a Heaven's Master rose from her body. It was obvious that she had completed her advancement. I was the first to walk over. I extended my hand and placed it on her head. Just as I was about to ask her how she felt, I suddenly felt a burning sensation on my hand. I lowered my head and realized that the golden light from the god statue's eyes was shining on Yao Yao's head. When I extended my hand, it coincidentally reached into the golden light. The burning sensation came from the back of my hand that was illuminated by the golden light. Due to my body's instincts, I subconsciously retracted my hand. I didn't expect that the golden light was like a gummy candy, sticking to my hand. When I retracted my hand, the golden light followed and shone on the same spot. With my cultivation, it was definitely a powerful force that could make me feel pain. Thus, I didn't dare to let my guard down. I prepared to think of a way to get rid of the golden light, but before I could do anything, the golden light reacted first. The golden light, which hadn't changed since it appeared, suddenly expanded and enveloped my entire hand. Moreover, it didn't stop and continued to expand. This time I panicked. I circulated the true essence in my body in an attempt to get rid of it. However, the golden light originated from the power of a god. It wasn't something that a mortal could resist. No matter how I struggled, I couldn't even stop the golden light from expanding, let alone get rid of it. In a short moment, the golden light expanded to a thickness of 2 feet. After it completely enveloped my body, it finally stopped. Under the intense pain, I circulated all of my true essence to cover the surface of my body to resist the pain. Next, I shielded my eyes with my hand and resisted the discomfort. I looked against the golden light and discovered that it wasn't just the god statue's right eye that was emitting light. The entire right side of its body was glowing. Not only that, but the hairs on the right side of the god statue were constantly expanding. Slowly, the entire left side of the god statue became like the right side of the god statue. From half-human half-beast, it had completely turned into a beast. After the hairs had completely covered its body, the god statue trembled as if it had come to life. Its eyes shone as it looked at me. Its mouth slowly opened, and a voice that seemed to come from the end of time and space resounded. "You! Come back! Quickly come back!" The voice was low and loud, slow and impatient. It was like the sound of a large bell. The sound waves shook the entire god temple. In the blink of an eye, countless vines in the temple were shattered. Even the statue itself seemed to be unable to withstand this kind of vibration. With a series of crisp sounds, the center of the statue cracked open. In an instant, it turned into countless gravel and fell down. Chapter 552. The Fox King statue was extremely huge, and it was made of stone that weighed at least dozens of tons. When it suddenly fell, it was as though the mountains were collapsing. With my cultivation, it wasn't a problem for me to withstand the falling stones. However, Yao Yao had just broken through, and her body was at its weakest. The fatty wasn't known for his physical strength, so it was inevitable that he would be injured by the falling stones. Logically speaking, I should have brought the two of them to a safe area. However, I was currently stunned by the god's statue. I was stunned on the spot and couldn't react in time. The black-clothed priest was the same as me. He stared blankly at the crumbling statue, as though he had forgotten everything. On the other hand, clan leader Qingqiu let out a delicate cry at this moment. Her body suddenly shot out, one hand grabbing the little fox Yao Yao who was nestled on the cattail hassock, the other hand grabbing Fatty's shoulder, bringing the two of them out of the range of the collapsing statue. After the two of them left, the black-clothed priest and I came back to our senses. We exchanged glances and quickly retreated, escaping as well. Just as the two of us left, the Fox King statue's body collapsed, and its huge head broke into several pieces. It fell heavily and created a few large holes on the ground, completely destroying the floor of the temple. The huge commotion alerted the Qingqiu tribe members outside the temple. In a short while, many Qingqiu tribe members in black and white clothes gathered. Most of them looked panicked as they didn't know what had happened. There was also a small group that held artifacts and were on high alert. At this moment, all the stones had fallen, and there wasn't much danger. However, the entire temple was destroyed beyond recognition, and we couldn't stay any longer. The black-clothed priest came back to his senses. He turned around and calmed the crowd down. Then, he called the few of us to his private residence, which wasn't far from the Fox King Palace. On the way there, Yao Yao struggled out of the Qingqiu tribe leader's embrace and jumped onto the ground. She turned around and returned to her human form. When she had hurriedly escaped from the temple, her clothes had fallen into the ground. However, she had the cultivation of a celestial master, so she didn't need clothes. After she transformed, a white dress appeared on her body, and she looked even more alluring than before. I wasn't sure if it was because of the white dress, but she had an otherworldly celestial aura. After transforming, Yao Yao looked around in panic. When she saw me, she regained her calmness, ran over and followed behind me. At this time, I also recovered from the panic and asked about Yao Yao's situation. After knowing that she was fine, only then did I feel relieved. When we arrived at the black-robed priest's house, we sat down according to the host and guest. We looked at each other, speechless. After a long time, the black-robed priest finally spoke. "Divine envoys, there's something I don't know if I should ask." After what had just happened, the black-robed priest became even angrier towards me. He even addressed me respectfully. I waved my hand. "Just say it." After getting permission, the black-robed priest asked, "Just now in the temple, what did the Fox King mean by what he said to you? Logically speaking, the two of you had just appeared, so why did the Fox King summon you back?" I couldn't help but smile wryly when I heard his question. He was confused, but I was even more confused. The appearance of this Fox King had overturned all my previous speculations about myself. Just now, when the Fox King performed a miracle, it clearly had nothing to do with me at first. He had only bestowed the Fox King's true blood to Yao Yao. Later, when I touched the golden light, he discovered me and said those words to me. It was probably because of those words that his divine power couldn't support it, causing the statue to collapse. From the current situation, I couldn't be sure if this Fox King was the monster emperor, but he definitely wasn't from my previous life. Clearly, he was still alive somewhere and hadn't died. Of course, it was impossible to say that he had nothing to do with me. There had to be a reason why he had hastily summoned me back. I wasn't sure where he wanted me to go, but from the black-robed priest's story, he most likely wanted me to go back to the so-called mountain and sea realm. I didn't know where the mountain and sea realm was, and I had no way of finding it. But even if I knew where it was, considering my current cultivation base, it wasn't the time to think about it. I was only a heavenly master, while the Fox King, the monster emperor, and the mountain and sea realm Shinnong were all immortals from legends. In the conflict between these immortals, there was no place for me to stand. Thinking about it now would do me more harm than good. What I should be thinking about was to hurry back to Shenzhen and use the 7-star mugwort that I had just obtained to cure little Wang Li's illness. After making up my mind, I shook my head at the black-robed priest. I don't know what the Fox King meant, but if the Fox King wants me to do something, he'll definitely send a message. We don't need to waste our time guessing. My words were completely perfunctory, and the black-robed priest could tell. He was stunned for a moment and his mouth moved, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Since there was nothing else to do, I called for Yao Yao and the fatty. I bid farewell to the black-robed priest and prepared to leave. Seeing that I was leaving, the black-robed priest frowned. After a moment of silence, he pointed at Yao Yao and said hesitantly, "Yao Yao is a member of the Green Hill tribe. I wonder if the god's emissary can keep her here? Let Yao Yao stay? What a joke." Not long ago, he had wanted to kill Yao Yao as a sacrifice to the Fox King. Although according to him, Yao Yao couldn't be used as a sacrifice after becoming a monster king, he had a past record. I wouldn't trust his words, and I didn't dare to keep Yao Yao here. Just as I was about to shake my head and refuse, Yao Yao suddenly pulled my arm from behind. She was still cautious and timid as she said, "Brother, I want to stay." Stay? I was stunned. Yao Yao was a timid person, and it was her mother's decision to return to the Green Hill tribe. It wasn't her original intention. Furthermore, she had almost lost her life. How could she stay? I asked her, puzzled, Why do you want to stay? Aren't you afraid to stay here alone? Yao Yao said softly, If I go back, my mother will definitely be unhappy. Also, after I woke up, I had a feeling that the black-robed grandpa, the white-robed sister, and everyone else here are like my family. They definitely won't hurt Yao Yao. Then, she seemed to be afraid that I would reject her, so she quickly added, Also, Yao Yao is very powerful now. She can protect herself. This should be the result of the bloodline that the black-robed priest had mentioned. Yao Yao had received the true blood from the Fox King, and her Green Hill tribe bloodline became stronger. She also had a better impression of the entire Green Hill tribe. I sighed and made a decision in my heart. This was the connection between the bloodlines, and it wasn't something that could be stopped by humans. Since Yao Yao wanted to stay, I would let her stay. After all, she was a member of the Green Hill Fox tribe. The experience of growing up in the human world wasn't a good thing for her. Now that she had returned to her tribe, she might be able to find her true self. As for her safety, I wasn't worried at all. Yao Yao had received the true blood of the Fox King. She was the only member of the Green Hill tribe who possessed the ancient bloodline. The future of the Green Hill Fox tribe depended on her. No matter what, the black-robed priest wouldn't want to offer her to the Fox King. On the contrary, he would do his best to protect Yao Yao, so that she could grow healthily and revitalize the entire Green Hill Fox tribe in the future. Even so, I warned the black-robed priest and the Green Hill tribe leader solemnly, telling them to protect Yao Yao. If I were to find out that anything happened to Yao Yao here, I would definitely come knocking on their door and annihilate the entire Green Hill Fox tribe. I wasn't joking. With the monster refining gourd, I definitely had the ability to do that. The black-robed priest and the Green Hill tribe leader were well aware of that. After hearing what I said, the two of them didn't get angry. Instead, they became happy, especially the black-robed priest. He couldn't suppress the smile on his wrinkled face. He repeatedly promised me that as long as he was here, he would definitely protect Yao Yao. After he said that, he couldn't help but thank me. His attitude was extremely sincere. That was the only thing I could do. After giving my instructions, I turned to look at Yao Yao, feeling a little reluctant to part with her. Although we hadn't known each other for a long time, in my heart, I had already treated this adorable little girl as my own younger sister. I really couldn't bear to see her suffer any grievances. However, people had to grow up. Yao Yao had her own path to walk. The only thing I could do was to give her my blessings. I told her to be careful. If she encountered any problems, she had to think twice. She shouldn't always treat others as good people. If anything happened, she could call me. Although this place was remote, it was close to a scenic area. There was still cell phone signal. Chapter 553. Although there were many twists and turns in the journey to the Green Mountains, the result was undoubtedly good. Yao Yao had a place to go and I successfully obtained the 7-star mugwort. What I needed to do next was to return to Shenzhen as soon as possible and use the power of the 7-star mugwort to slow down little Wang Li's illness. As for Fatty, I had already told him that he would first follow me back to Shenzhen. When I went home to pay my respects to my parents during the Lunar New Year, he would come back with me. After descending Green Dragon Mountain, Fatty and I stopped at the scenic area to rest for the night because it was already late. The next day, we rushed to Jining Tsiufu Airport and flew back to Shenzhen. All these years, I had been running around without stopping, but when it came to the means of transportation, planes could only be ranked at the bottom. The number of times I had taken them could be counted on one hand. When a cultivator was in the earthly master realm, all their Taoist chi was obtained from the dragon vein. The dragon vein was also known as the vein of the earth. This was also the reason why the 3 realms of dragon seeking, acupuncture, and glorious knowledge were collectively known as earthly masters. In the earthly master realm, the earth was both the source and the restraint. Unless it was an emergency, otherwise they would never choose to take a plane. But now it was different. In the tomb of Chiyu, I had successfully become a heavenly master. All my Taoist chi and shaman chi had turned into true essence. I had the ability to fly in the sky and was no longer restrained by the vein of the earth. It was just like when one had just become a heavenly master and their body involuntarily floated in the air. Heavenly masters were called heavenly masters because after reaching this realm, regardless of cultivation or state of mind, there would be an indescribable and subtle feeling of the sky. Every time one broke away from the earth and soared into the sky, every cell in the body seemed to be cheering, feeling endless joy. The circulation of the true essence in the body would also be much faster than usual. So when I took a plane and soared in the sky, it was actually beneficial to my cultivation. It was a pity that although the civilian plane flew at a high altitude, the cabin was a closed environment. It was impossible for me to feel the power of heaven and earth in the sky. I sat in the window seat of the plane and looked at the clouds outside. I was thinking that, if I had the chance, I would definitely get a small plane that could fly at high altitudes and send me high up in the sky to try cultivating. Perhaps I would be able to reap some benefits. The air at high altitudes is thin and the air pressure is lower. If an ordinary person did not have the protection of the cabin, they would suffer from hypoxia and frostbite if they were lucky, or they would die on the spot if they were unlucky. However, it is different for cultivators. For example, when I was at the Geomaster realm, I was already immune to the cold and heat. Regardless of whether it was a high temperature of 40 degrees Celsius in summer or a low temperature of 0 degrees Celsius in winter, it made no difference to me. Even if it was an ultra-low temperature that was close to 100 degrees Celsius in high altitudes, with the strength of my body, I could ignore it. Although the low air pressure and lack of oxygen were a little troublesome, they would not cause any problems in the short term. While I was thinking about cultivation, the fatty next to me was sleeping soundly on the business class chair. The stewardess was worried that the cabin temperature was too low, so she covered him with a blanket, but she didn't wake him up. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was a cultivator, but he wasn't vigilant at all. It was amazing. However, from the bottom of my heart, I had always envied the fatty. He and I had embarked on the path of cultivation at almost the same time. Along the way, I had encountered countless dangers. There were even a few times when I was in a life-threatening situation. If it wasn't for my good luck, it was hard to say if I could have survived until now. Fatty, on the other hand, is different. Strictly speaking, he has been cultivating for a longer time than me, but from the beginning, he has been under the protection of the Zhanyan sect. He has an extremely doting master to take care of him, so he has not suffered at all. When we met again, we went to the Fire God Temple. Although there were many dangers along the way, most of them didn't affect the fatty. When we arrived at the Fire God Temple, although the fatty had disappeared for a year, when he reappeared, he said that he didn't have any memories of that year. It was obvious that he hadn't encountered any danger. Since then, his path had been smooth. Although the cultivation of the Zhanyan sect was different from the others, he was close to the heavenly master realm. Moreover, during the trip to Chiyo's tomb, he had obtained an ancient divine tool, the devil refining gourd. In the world of metaphysics, there was a saying about luck. No matter if it was the family, the country, or the world, everything was controlled by luck. The fatty was a person with great luck. He had been in the cultivation world for so many years, but he still had a pure and innocent heart. He didn't have any worries. He wasn't like me, who hadn't had a good sleep for many years. At night, if there was a little movement, I would wake up instantly. This was under the condition that I was sleeping. Most of the time, I closed my eyes and cultivated instead of sleeping. The fatty was still sleeping soundly until the plane landed at the bow an airport. I slapped his head twice, and then he stretched his body and woke up. He was a guy that people envied. Since I didn't want to trouble Zhang Kanwan and the others, I didn't inform them beforehand that I was coming back. After leaving the airport, the fatty and I took a taxi to the Feng Shui metaphysics shop. When we arrived at the shop, I lifted my head and saw the words Feng Shui metaphysics shop. I felt at ease. After my parents had passed away, the word home had disappeared from my life. The Feng Shui metaphysics shop in front of me was a gift from Wang Yongjun. I hadn't stayed here for a long time. However, in this world, the only place that I could call home was this small shop. The corners of my mouth curled into a smile as I stepped into the shop. After entering the shop, I first observed the talismans on display. Most of them were made by me, and a few were new ones. From their auras, I could tell that Zhang Kanwan had made them. Selling talismans was a business that didn't open for business for 3 years. Since there were a few new talismans, it seemed that the shop's business wasn't bad. However, after looking at the talismans for a long time, no one came to greet me. I felt a little strange. I put away my smile and walked around the shelves to look at the counter. Behind the red wooden counter, it was usually Xie Qinghua or Lu Chuanda. The shop's business was usually taken care of by the two of them. But today there was no one behind the counter. I frowned. Just as I was about to go to the second floor, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. At the same time, a woman's voice called out, "Sirs, what do you want?" Hearing the voice, I turned around and saw that the woman behind me was Wang Kuan's wife. She was carrying some food in her hands and was walking into the shop in a hurry. When I turned around, she recognized me. Her expression instantly changed, and she said with a sobbing tone, "Mr. Zhou, you're finally back. I was already suspicious about the strange situation in the shop." Hearing her words, my heart tightened. I quickly asked her, "What happened? Where are Xie Qinghua and Lu Chuanda? How are little Wang Li and brother Zhang?" It would have been better if I hadn't asked. As soon as I asked, Wang Kuan's wife burst into tears. She choked with sobs and said, "Mr. Zhou, you have to save Wang Li. You have to save Wang Li." As she said that, she was about to kneel down in front of me. I quickly reached out and pulled her back. Confused, I said, "Don't worry. I went out this time to find the life-saving herb for Wang Li, and I've successfully brought it back. I promise you that Wang Li will be fine. Tell me, did something happen in the shop? Where are brother Zhang and the others?" Logically speaking, after hearing my words, she should have calmed down. However, the tears on her face didn't stop. Sobbing, she said, "Brother Zhang is upstairs. Mr. Xie and the others aren't in the shop now. Mr. Zhou, I beg you, you have to save Li." I had already told her that I had found the life-saving herb for Wang Li. Why did she say that? I frowned and asked her again, "What happened?" While sobbing, Wang Kuan's wife told me, "In the 2 months that I was gone, something big happened." According to her, at first, 2 Taoist priests came to the shop to buy talismans. After looking at the talismans in the shop, they insisted on finding the person who made the talismans. Xie Qinghua and Lu Chuanda came to see them, but they immediately recognized that they weren't talisman makers. The 2 Taoists were rude and unreasonable, and their cultivation wasn't bad either. Xie and Lu had no choice but to report it to Zhang Kanwan and let him deal with it. When the 2 Taoists saw Zhang Kanwan, their attitude became better. They said that most of the talismans in the shop had traces of their sect making talismans. They asked if Zhang Kanwan was a fellow Taoist of the same sect. After getting a denial, the 2 Taoists' attitude became rude again. They scolded Zhang Kanwan, saying that he must have secretly learned how to make talismans from their sect and sold them. It was a disgrace to their sect, so they demanded an explanation from Zhang Kanwan. They also demanded that all the talismans be taken away. The 2 Taoists were only at the early stage of the glorious knowledge realm. Even if they worked together, they wouldn't be Zhang Kanwan's match. With Zhang Kanwan's character, he wouldn't argue with them. He didn't spoil them either. After beating them up, he threw them out. Before leaving, the 2 Taoists said that they wouldn't let this matter go. I thought it was just a small disturbance, but half a month later, the two Taoists reappeared. This time, they were accompanied by a few older Taoists. These older Taoists had extraordinary cultivation levels. As soon as they appeared, Zhang Canwen knew he wasn't their match. Although Zhang Canwen looked rough, he wasn't a reckless person. Moreover, these talismans were made by me, so he didn't know if I had anything to do with the other party's sect. To be safe, he didn't try to force the issue. He agreed to let the Taoists take the talismans away. As for the person who made the talismans, he said it was a friend and made up a name. Because his cultivation level was different from the aura on the talismans, the old Taoists didn't force him too much. They only said that they would come back to check when the person who made the talismans returned. The matter was supposed to be over, but just as the Taoists were about to take the talismans and leave, little Wang Li on the second floor started crying. Wang Kuan's wife couldn't calm him down, so she carried him downstairs to show Zhang Canwen. However, she was seen by the Taoists. Over the past few months, the evil aura on little Wang Li's body had become stronger. The Taoists had extraordinary cultivation levels, so they saw the strangeness on Wang Li's body and wanted to check it out. Zhang Canwen didn't agree, but he was injured by them. After checking, the Taoists came to the same conclusion as Zhang Canwen. They said that little Wang Li was possessed by a demon and would bring disaster to the world in the future. They wanted to kill little Wang Li on the spot. Fortunately, Zhang Canwen used the ancient book of the Song of Righteousness and temporarily obtained the power of a heavenly master. He defeated the Taoists and took back Wang Li. The Taoists' cultivation levels were also at the peak of the later stage of glorious memory. They couldn't defeat Zhang Canwen, who had suddenly entered the heavenly master realm, but they didn't retreat. Instead, they threatened Zhang Canwen to hand over little Wang Li within a week. Otherwise, the seniors of their sect would come. At that time, whoever tried to stop them would die. After they left, Zhang Canwen rested for 2 days. Then, he dismissed Xie Qinghua and Lu Chuanda. He stayed with little Wang Li. It was obvious that he would protect little Wang Li with his life. However, from the way he dismissed Xie Qinghua and Lu Chuanda, it was clear that he was ready to die and didn't have much confidence. Zhang Canwen's cultivation level was close to the peak of glorious memory. After using the ancient book of the Song of Righteousness, he could even use the power of a heavenly master. There were at least many heavenly masters, or even Yang God heavenly master. There weren't many in the world. In addition, they were Taoists and their style of doing things. After listening to Wang Kuan's wife's story, a few words came to my mind. Chapter 554. Don't worry. Since I'm back, I can naturally protect little Wang Li. I sighed and comforted Wang Kuan's wife gently. I know. Probably out of trust in me, Wang Kuan's wife wiped her tears and stopped crying. Mr. Little Zhou, I'll cook for you. I watched as Wang Kuan's wife wiped her tears and walked into the kitchen. I signaled the fatty with my eyes and brought him to the second floor. I pushed the door open and saw Zhang Canwen sitting on the bed. Seeing the fatty and I enter, Zhang Canwen slowly opened his eyes and looked at me in surprise and joy. Zhou-yi, you've advanced to Celestial Master? Of course. I smiled at him and sat on the sofa opposite him. Not only that, I also brought back 7-star mugwort. A hint of joy appeared on Zhang Canwen's face, but it was only for a moment. He immediately frowned and smiled bitterly. I'm afraid I found it a little too late. It's too late. Brother Zhang, is it Celestial Master sect? You know about it? Zhang Canwen raised his eyebrows. He obviously didn't expect me to know about this. I nodded and briefly explained what Wang Kuan's wife had told me to verify with Zhang Canwen. It is indeed Celestial Master sect. Zhang Canwen sighed and his eyes were filled with uneasiness. Last time, only a few Celestial Master at the peak of the late stage came. I could still deal with them, but next time I might not be able to. Brother Zhang, there's still me. I chuckled and said to Zhang Kanwen. You? Zhang Kanwen obviously wasn't optimistic. You just advanced to Celestial Master. Maybe we can deal with 2 or 3, but there's nothing we can do if there are more. You're underestimating me too much. I thought for a moment before saying slowly, if it's an ordinary Celestial Master, I can probably deal with 3 to 5 at the same time, but the premise is that there's no Yang God Celestial Master. How can there be no Yang God Celestial Master in Celestial Master sect? Zhang Kanwen was stunned at first, then he shook his head with a bitter smile. There definitely is, but they might not necessarily come. I shook my head and said, they only think that you're the only one who barely reached Celestial Master, so they definitely won't send Yang God Celestial Master. I say, at most, they'll send a few ordinary Celestial Masters. Zhang Kanwen thought about it and agreed with me. However, he still had some doubts. What about the next time? Then we'll talk about it next time. After cultivating for so many years and experiencing so many dangers, I had long since trained to be indifferent. Then, I smiled and stood up. I put the 7-star mugwort on the table. Brother Zhang, no matter what, you should treat Wang Li first. I'm here. Don't worry. Zhang Kanwen opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, it turned into a long sigh and he shut his mouth. Besides, we don't have to sacrifice anyone. At worst, we can just retreat together and come back to get back at them in the future. I saw the tense atmosphere, so I smiled and tried to ease the tension. Brother Zhang, you should take care of your wounds first. The people from the Heavenly Master sect won't come tonight. We should rest well tonight. The fatty and I got up and left the room, closing the door behind us. The fatty stared at me and asked softly, how do you plan to deal with the Celestial Master Yang Xin of the Celestial Master sect? What else can I do? I'll just deal with it when it comes. If I can't stop them, I'll just run away. I pouted my lips and walked forward. The Celestial Master sect of Mount Longhu was the leader of the Taoist sects in the world of metaphysics for 2,000 years. They controlled the world, so there should be at least a dozen Celestial Masters there, right? Not to mention the mysterious Celestial Master Zhang. Running away might be a good idea. If I really forced them to gang up on me, it would be really troublesome. Don't think too much. Rest well tonight and adjust your condition. At least we can get through this. Seeing that the fatty was a little nervous, I comforted him. Let's treat Wang Li here first. After that, it will be more convenient for us to escape or fight the enemy. The fatty nodded and touched the shining wall of the monster refining pot. He looked disgusted as if he was touching his wife. He sighed and walked back to the room. I also went back to the room and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling in a daze. I had finally become a Celestial Master. This was the realm that I had been yearning for. In the eyes of ordinary cultivators, Celestial Master was the pinnacle of cultivation, an existence like an immortal. I used to be the same. I dreamed of becoming a Celestial Master. I always felt that as long as I became a Celestial Master, I would wake up smiling even in my dreams. But now, I knew that there was a Yang God Celestial Master above the Celestial Master. There were also the 2 mysterious realms of Yang God Ascension and Cloud Ascension. To be honest, my yearning for a Celestial Master had faded a lot and I was no longer so obsessed with it. What's more, my Celestial Master seal had the words Natural Born Saint. I cultivated both witchcraft and cultivation. Although my talent wasn't unique, it was at least 1 in 10,000. The Cloud Ascension realm wasn't something I didn't dare to imagine. After the Cloud Ascension, I would be an immortal, right? The Heaven's Path that had once stood between me and Tao Wu in the Fire God Temple should at least be in this realm. If I could reach this realm, it would be natural for me to break free from the Heaven's Path. After thinking about it for a long time, I still couldn't figure it out. At this moment, my mind was a mess and I was faintly tired. Although I didn't need to rely on sleep to replenish my energy after becoming a Celestial Master, The journey was tiring, and I really wanted to have a good sleep. Who cares about the Celestial Master sect? I'll think about it tomorrow. As I thought about it, I gradually closed my eyes and fell into a deep sleep. The night passed uneventfully. The next morning, when I woke up and went downstairs, the fatty and Zhang Canwen were already sitting around the table. When they saw me coming down, they both stared at me. "What are you guys doing so early in the morning?" I had goosebumps as they stared at me. I smiled awkwardly and walked to the table. "Take a look. Is there anything wrong with this thing?" The fatty wasn't as carefree as he usually was. He pointed at the table and said to me with a solemn expression. I looked in the direction of his finger. There was a small bronze pot on the table. It was the monster refining pot. "Isn't this your monster refining pot?" I frowned and looked at the fatty. "What's wrong with it?" "Take a closer look. Don't use your connections." I let out a sigh and was confused. "I can't tell. What's wrong?" "The monster refining pot is moving." The fatty's eyes were a bit weird. He pointed at the demon purification pot and closed his mouth after saying that. "It's moving?" I was bewildered and couldn't react in time. However, I still turned to look at the monster refining pot. Indeed, with the fatty's reminder, I soon found something strange. The monster refining pot was moving on its own. Normally, no matter how magical the monster refining pot was, it was just an inanimate object. But now it was shivering slightly. Although it was hard to notice, it was really shivering. "What's going on?" I frowned. I didn't know why, but I suddenly had a bad premonition. "Have you checked inside the monster refining pot?" "No." The fatty shook his head. "It's waiting for you. Old Zhang is still injured. If you come and protect him, I'll feel more at ease." I nodded, but I was still suspicious. The monster refining pot was the fatty's item, so it shouldn't have made such a mistake. However, it was Chio's relic. Even if it wasn't as good as the Xianyuan sword, it was still one of our trump cards. I had to check it carefully. "Go in and see. Brother Zhang and I will protect you outside." Then, I sat cross-legged, releasing my Dao and Shaman energy to protect me. "Okay." The fatty was decisive. Seeing my posture, he didn't say anything and disappeared. I knew he had entered the space inside the monster refining gourd. I sat there and released my Dao and Shaman energy to surround the monster refining pot. At the same time, I continued to check. The monster refining pot didn't look strange. It was just shivering slightly. If I didn't know better, I would have thought that it was a fake item bought from the antique market and couldn't stand steadily on the table. After 1 minute, the fatty still hadn't come out. I was a little anxious. I glanced at Zhang Canwen and saw that he was also anxious. If it was a small problem, 1 minute was enough for the fatty to solve it. Even if he couldn't see anything wrong, he wouldn't just come out. If he still hadn't come out, it meant that something had happened. Chapter 555. I was shocked and didn't have time to do anything else. I hurriedly controlled my true chi to attack it. Who knew that the black smoke didn't care about my cultivation base and directly passed through it? At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared outside the pot. It was the fatty. As soon as he appeared, he couldn't help but take a few steps back. Then, he sat on the ground. His face was pale and there was a faint trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth. "Fatty!" I was shocked and quickly looked in the fatty's direction. He waved his hand and shouted with a ferocious face, "Don't worry about me. Hurry up and seal the devil refining pot." However, it was too late. Just as I turned my head, I saw that the black smoke that was surging out of the devil refining pot was getting thicker and thicker. It gradually condensed and formed the outline of a person. I gritted my teeth and directly used the Celestial Master seal. The 4 black and white words "Natural Saint" spun and covered the black smoke. Who would have thought that the 4 words that I had used all of my strength would melt into the black smoke like a clay ox entering the sea, disappearing in an instant. My heart instantly sank and I had a bad feeling. The black smoke didn't seem to be affected by my full power strike as it continued to slowly gather. Not long after, a clear silhouette appeared in front of me. Looking at the figure wearing an iron mask, my heart sank. Who else could it be other than Lu Zhenyang, who had suddenly run out of the devil refining pot? Lu Zhenyang. Why was he in the devil refining pot? Now wasn't the time to be surprised. I gritted my teeth and summoned my eyes and the snake spirit. At the same time, I held the Xian Yuan sword in my hand and was ready to fight at any time. When Lu Zhenyang came out, he seemed to be in a daze. However, not long after, he quivered and recognized the situation around him. Zhou Yi. He turned his head abruptly and faced me. Although I couldn't see his expression through the iron mask, I knew that Lu Zhenyang was looking at me with eyes filled with hatred and anger. Why are you here? To be honest, I was a bit nervous. This Lu Zhenyang had escaped death time and time again. Later on, he obtained Qiu's inheritance in Qiu's tomb. I don't know how strong he is now. However, even if his cultivation didn't increase, just based on his performance when he fought against several heavenly masters from the Wang clan alone, I, who had already become a heavenly master, wouldn't be a match for him. Are you surprised? Lu Zhenyang laughed cruelly. His laughter was hoarse and unpleasant to the ears. Speaking of which, it's all thanks to you as a friend. Otherwise, I really wouldn't know how to escape from that damned place. This friend of mine? I was stunned, but I immediately reacted. He was talking about the fatty. You are living in the demon purification gourd. I secretly mobilized my Dao Qi and true essence, ready to activate the Xianyuan sword's sword light at any time. At the same time, I calmly looked at Lu Zhenyang. Yes, but also wrong. Lu Zhenyang looked at me as though he was looking at a chicken waiting to be slaughtered. To be exact, when I was in Qiu's tomb, I didn't have time to escape and was sucked in by the demon purification gourd. I thought that I would suffer a lot in there. Unexpectedly, there wasn't any danger in there, and it was quite suitable for cultivation. I originally wanted to cultivate for a period of time, but I didn't expect this fatty to bring me out. I accepted this explanation in my heart. If Lu Zhenyang could really enter and exit the demon purification gourd at will, he should have attacked when we were fighting in Green Hill Country. At that time we were distracted. Even if we didn't die from his sneak attack, we would be severely injured. There was no reason for him to wait until we were fully prepared before coming out. Zhou Yi, do you think that you can contend against me just because you possess such a treasure and have advanced to become a heavenly master? Lu Zhenyang's voice was like beating a broken drum, oppressive and unpleasant to the ears. I was shocked when I heard this. Although Lu Zhenyang was bad to the bone, he wasn't stupid. He could even be considered a smart person. If he dared to say that, it meant that he had absolute confidence in defeating me. There's no use in talking. Let's fight. I felt the huge aura from Lu Zhenyang's body and solemnly injected true essence into the Xianyuan sword. In an instant, I activated the sword light. Pretty much the moment I activated my true essence, the star-shaped sword light flew out and shot towards Lu Zhenyang like lightning. This treasure is really casting pearls before swine in your hands. Lu Zhenyang arrogantly shook his head. Black smoke rolled around his body. Qi Yu's tombstone broke out of the smoke and smashed onto the sword light. The two of them collided soundlessly, and then a series of Qi fluctuations suddenly exploded. He actually blocked it? My heart sank. This Xianyuan sword could be said to be my biggest trump card. When I was at the complete glory realm, I could use this sword light to kill a heavenly master. Now that I was a heavenly master and had the four-word heavenly master seal of a natural saint, logically speaking, if a normal heavenly master took my sword light head-on, even if they didn't die, they would definitely be heavily injured. However, Lu Zhenyang actually took my sword light so easily? He had gotten much stronger. Not mentioning anything else, He hadn't even used that terrifying Chi-Yu battle axe. He just used the Chi-Yu tombstone to take the Xianyuan sword's sword light head-on. Looking at my green face, Lu Zhenyang felt more and more delighted. He chuckled in a sinister manner. Hee hee, Zhou-Yi, aren't you a genius that only appears once in 1,000 years? During the Young Phoenix gathering, you almost killed me when we fought for the Obsidian Stone. Even in the Yinshang Royal Mausoleum, you lost your so-called genius aura and fell to such a state. Even my own grandfather was unwilling to help me kill you because you had the support of the old president. Zhou-Yi, I'd like to see who else can help you today. Every word that Lu Zhenyang said made my heart sink a little. It wasn't because of the content of his words, but because every time Lu Zhenyang spoke, his aura would increase by a little. Gradually, he changed from a normal sky master to the one he had in Chi-Yu's tomb. Then, he didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. He became stronger and stronger, to the point where I couldn't tell how strong he was. What benefits did this guy get from Chi-Yu's inheritance? I hated him in my heart, but I didn't dare to act rashly. I could only face Lu Zhenyang expressionlessly. Even Chi-Yu's tomb. I thought that I would be safe after I got Chi-Yu's inheritance. Who would have thought that you would break through to Sky Master there? You even got the legendary Qilin beast. Lu Zhenyang was still shouting hysterically. I understood that this person was about to go crazy. Falling in front of me time and time again had left a deep obsession in his heart. But this time, could I defeat him again? Looking at Lu Zhenyang, whose aura seemed to be endless, I was extremely nervous. Even this treasure belongs to you. Lu Zhenyang sneered and grabbed the monster refining gourd on the table. However, it's all thanks to this treasure that I can have today's fortune. After I finish you guys today, this treasure will still be mine. Seeing him grab the monster refining gourd, my eyes lit up and I glanced at the fat guy from the corner of my eyes. Chance. As expected, the fat guy caught the chance. He gritted his teeth and raised his hand to urge his Tao energy. He stared at Lu Zhenyang and shouted, "Collect!" That's right, it was the monster refining gourd. I was also shocked. The monster refining gourd was Chi-Yu's inheritance, an ancient divine weapon. Although it couldn't compare to the Xianyuan sword, it was still a rare treasure. Moreover, since the monster refining gourd had absorbed Lu Zhenyang once, it could absorb him a second time. Under the fat guy's urging, the monster refining gourd's lid suddenly opened. A mysterious aura surged out from the mouth of the gourd and swept towards Lu Zhenyang. However, I didn't expect that the monster refining gourd's aura would circle around Lu Zhenyang for a few rounds before disappearing in the air. Oh? You're still thinking about this? Lu Zhenyang was stunned. Then, he grabbed the monster refining gourd and laughed. Kid, this monster refining gourd can absorb me. However, it can't under the fat guy's urging. It can't be absorbed under the fat guy's urging. My heart instantly sank. The monster refining gourd had always been successful against monsters. No matter how powerful the monster was, the monster refining gourd could absorb them regardless of their cultivation. However, it was limited against cultivators. I was just guessing before, but after experimenting with Lu Zhenyang, I was finally sure. However, even if it was limited, the fat guy should be able to absorb people at Heaven Master Realm into the gourd. After all, his cultivation had reached the complete glory of knowledge. Along with the monster refining gourd's miraculous abilities, it definitely wouldn't be a problem for him to deal with Heaven Masters who were one realm higher than him. Although Lu Zhenyang's combat power was strong in Chi-Yu's tomb, his cultivation was still at Heaven Master Realm. Why was the monster refining gourd useless against him now? Could it be? A bad feeling flashed across my heart. Kid, take a good look. Lu Zhenyang sneered. The iron mask on his face trembled. It looked both funny and scary. No matter how much of a genius you were back then, aren't you still being left far behind by me now? Then, black energy surged from Lu Zhenyang's body, and a blood-red light slowly appeared above his head. Sun God. Lu Zhenyang was actually a Sun God celestial master. When he was at the normal Heaven Master realm, he could already shake a Sun God celestial master. Now that he was a Sun God celestial master, how terrifying would his power be? You didn't expect this, right? Lu Zhenyang's blood-red Sun God slowly opened its eyes. The small person revealed a strange smile. It looked extremely evil. Kid, tell me, how do you want to die today? I'll give you a chance to choose. I didn't reply. In actual fact, Lu Zhenyang's Sun God gave me a lot of pressure. Sun God Celestial Master was an existence that could crush ordinary Heaven Masters. Lu Zhenyang also had the 4-word Celestial Master seal like me. Even if the meaning of the words wasn't as good as mine, it couldn't make up for the huge difference in cultivation. Chapter 556. I stared at Lu Zhenyang as the Tao energy in my body surged. It flowed along the veins of the sky and out of my fingertips, pouring into the Xian Yuan sword. This time, I forcibly extracted half of my Taoist qi and jinqi from my body, because I understood that in the face of Lu Zhenyang, who had advanced to the Yang spirit realm, if I didn't use all my skills to fight him, I would have no chance of surviving. Although we were mortal enemies, I had to admit that Lu Zhenyang was indeed a very powerful enemy. After going through the test of death, he had finally reached Yang God Celestial Master before me. In this situation, the Fatty and Zhang Kanwen weren't even Celestial Masters, so they obviously couldn't help. The only one who could save the situation was me. And the Xian Yuan sword was my strongest move. Besides this, my other supernatural powers would be useless against Lu Zhenyang, who had already advanced to Yang God. Thus, I didn't hesitate to launch a thunderous attack. The Xian Yuan sword was infused with true essence and Tao Qi, and the sword box shook violently. Then, a thin light path flowed forward along the lines on the sword box and gathered at the front of the box. In the blink of an eye, the light shone brightly. A breathtaking aura of desolation mixed with white light gushed out, forming a huge ball of light that filled half of the room. The ball of light paused for a moment, then suddenly shrank. Finally, only a small white dot was left. It swayed a few times in the air, then the starlight rushed towards Lu Zhenyang like a lightning bolt. In the blink of an eye, Lu Zhenyang's blood-red Yang spirit obviously had no time to react. The moment the white light appeared, he frantically formed a hand seal, but it was still too late. Almost in an instant, the sword light collided with Lu Zhenyang's Yang spirit. The sword light didn't look powerful, but when it got close to the blood-red Yang God, it suddenly exploded. The blood-red Yang God's small face was filled with horror. In an instant it was drowned in the white light, and the white light filled the entire room. I subconsciously closed my eyes to block the strong wind that was coming toward me. I couldn't help but feel happy. I did it. That small sword light looked insignificant, but in fact, it contained half of my Tao energy. I am now a Taoist master. Under the effect of the 4-word seal, my Taoist qi and real vitality is incomparably vigorous. After being greatly condensed and enhanced by the Xianyuan sword case, it finally condensed into this point of sword light, which is many times stronger than my original Taoist qi and real vitality. Lu Zhenyang didn't even have the time to defend against such a lightning-fast strike. He took the full brunt of my attack. Little snake, pupil. I didn't have much time to think. I subconsciously called for my 2 strongest helpers and circulated my true essence. With a roar, I charged forward. While you're down, I'll take your life. While Lu Zhenyang has just finished dealing with the sword rays, I'll try to defeat him in one fell swoop. A dark green light gradually condensed on my hand. As a heavenly master that cultivated both magic and Taoism, my body was circulating 2 different types of true essence. This meant that the true essence in my body was twice that of others. I wouldn't have my entire body's true essence drained just from using my killing technique. The remaining shaman chi and real vitality would be used to deal the final blow to Lu Zhenyang. The dark green shaman chi and real vitality danced in the air. Then, it rose up against the wind, like a ball of flames burning on my hand. I charged to a spot just a step away from Lu Zhenyang. The snake spirit was in my left eye and the pupil on my right, forming a pincer attack. Right at that moment, the white light dissipated in the air like mist. However, what appeared in front of me was a blood-red light screen. This light screen was formed by a dense array of strange beasts. Countless strange beasts that I didn't know the names of were entangled together. There were also the patterns of mountains and rivers nearby, forming a barrier in front of Lu Zhenyang. The blood-colored Yang god's aura seemed to be unstable. Seeing me charge forward, a vicious smile appeared on its face. My heart sank. Lu Zhenyang obviously wasn't unaffected, but my full power attack didn't cause as much damage to him as I had imagined. Was this the power of a Yang god celestial master? He was really too strong. I felt as if there was a mountain pressing on my heart. Although the blood-red barrier in front of me slowly faded and then disappeared, the pressure didn't decrease at all. Before the sword light exploded, I saw Lu Zhenyang's hands forming a seal. He was probably preparing for this counterattack. Heh! Is this the power of the Xianyuan sword? The blood-colored Yang god exhaled. The vicious expression on its face didn't decrease, but it became even more vicious. The childlike face revealed such a vicious expression. It looked really weird. Die. I was too lazy to talk to him. The arrow was already knocked on the bow and I had to release it. I raised my right hand and stared at the blood-colored Yang god in front of me. My fingers pointed a few times, and the shaman chi and real vitality seemed to have a spirit of their own. They turned into green smoke in the direction I pointed. The snake spirit and the pupil attacked at the same time. The overwhelming yin energy followed the shaman chi and real vitality and surged forward. Is that all you have? You really disappoint me. The blood-colored Yang god grinned. Then, he raised his hand and placed it in front of his chest. He crossed his fingers and mumbled something. Then, a red light shone from the ground. He didn't dodge at all. Instead, he started to counterattack. My heart sank. Although our attacks weren't as powerful as the Xianyuan sword's sword light, it wasn't something that could be easily blocked. Lu Zhenyang still had a backup plan. As expected, when the real vitality was about to touch the blood-colored Yang god, the blood-red barrier that had blocked the Xianyuan sword's full power attack appeared again. This time, the barrier was obviously much smaller. It didn't protect Lu Zhenyang's body and Yang god like before. Instead, it was like a small round shield that blocked in front of him. How could such a small barrier block our attack? I frowned. At that moment, the shaman chi and real vitality hit the barrier. 1 divided into 2, 2 divided into 3, 3 divided into 4. One by one, the densely packed blood-colored shields suddenly appeared in front of Lu Zhenyang. After blocking all of our attacks, there seemed to be a few cracks on them. Then, they dissipated one by one. I knew that the barrier had really disappeared. However, the attack that I had condensed with my shaman chi had also dissipated. I didn't have time to launch another round of attacks. Too weak. Zhou Yi, you are too weak. The blood-colored Yang god's mouth opened and closed, mercilessly mocking me. Is that all you have? Heh, I will show you what real power is. Just as Lu Zhenyang finished speaking, the red light that had been surging on the ground suddenly extinguished and disappeared into the ground. Then, countless red arms broke through the ground. I saw countless red hands grabbing at me, and I subconsciously used Heavenly Spirit 9-step. Not only could the Heavenly Spirit 9 steps strengthen true vitality, but it also had the effect of dodging and maneuvering. In an instant I dodged a few. However, the red arms seemed to be endless. There were more arms grabbing at me. Even if my movement technique wasn't bad, my ankle was still grabbed. As soon as the blood-red arm touched my calf, I felt my body stiffen. Even though I had used my shaman energy to chop off the arm in time, I was still entangled by the endless blood-red hands that came after that. First my ankle, then my arm, body, and neck. Many bloody hands held me firmly on the spot, and I couldn't move at all. "Brother!" I heard Tong Tong's painful cry. I quickly turned around and saw that Tong Tong was also grabbed by many bloody hands. Although Tong Tong was a spirit body, the bloody hands could restrain him, and they quickly drowned him. On the other side, the snake spirit wasn't any better. He didn't even have time to show his real body before he was pressed to the ground. I felt a chill run up my spine, and I tried my best to circulate my true vitality. Although I could barely circulate my true vitality, after being grabbed by the strange bloody hands, the circulation speed of my true vitality was several times slower. It was as if I was swimming with a body full of iron, slow and heavy. These strange bloody hands actually had such supernatural powers. I looked at Lu Zhenyang with despair in my eyes. He had actually become so strong after becoming a young god celestial master. He was so strong that I couldn't deal with him even if I tried my best. "Zhou Yi, you should really take a good look at your current state." The blood-colored young god floated into the air, and Lu Zhenyang's ugly face was filled with pride. "There will come a day when you will fall into my hands? I have given you so many benefits in Chiyo's tomb, but in the end you are still trash." I gritted my teeth and didn't speak. Now that I was under someone's control, no matter what I said, I would just be asking to be humiliated. The only thing I could do now was to get rid of these bloody hands, and then think about it. I tried to touch these bloody hands, and they didn't seem to cause me any harm. All they could do was control me, but this control was extremely overbearing. Not only was I unable to move, but even the true vitality in my body was sealed. With my cultivation, I could only slowly control a small amount of true vitality. If it was an ordinary celestial master, he wouldn't even be able to circulate a bit of true vitality. "I told you, I will show you what real power is." Lu Zhenyang's ugly face looked even more complacent and he said, "It's a pity that I don't have the Chiyu axe. Otherwise, when I used the power of the Chiyu axe just now, your soul would have been destroyed. Of course, the result would be the same. Zhou Yi, die." Then, a trace of ruthlessness flashed across Lu Zhenyang's face. The blood-colored young god slowly opened its mouth and spat out a black gas. There wasn't much black gas. After it was spat out, it floated above his head and stopped moving. What is this guy trying to do? I frowned and didn't understand. Right at that moment, Lu Zhenyang's body, which was sitting cross-legged on the ground, suddenly emitted black smoke. It floated up and resonated with the ball of smoke in the air. There seemed to be a familiar aura from the black smoke. I was stunned at first, but I immediately reacted. It was Chiyo's aura. Chapter 557. Brat, watch carefully. It's your good fortune to be able to die under Chiyo's ancient technique. Lu Zhenyang's blood-colored young god laughed cruelly. His small hands quickly formed hand seals. Then, he suddenly stretched out his hand and pressed it against the black smoke in the center. The black smoke shook. At first, it was slightly scattered, but then it quickly gathered together and began to spin rapidly. The surrounding black smoke that had floated up later also gathered around it, spinning like stars surrounding the moon. As it spun faster and faster, the black smoke slowly rose until it was 3 feet above the blood-colored young god's head. It gradually formed a whirlpool. The whirlpool was extremely extraordinary. With just a glance, it was as if one's gaze would be sucked in. There was also a strong ancient aura coming from it. Feeling the aura coming from the whirlpool, I became more and more nervous. Lu Zhenyang had obviously used a killing move, but my body was currently restrained. Not to mention fighting back. I couldn't even move. At this moment, I understood that Lu Zhenyang, who had obtained Chiyo's inheritance and condensed his young god, was much stronger than me. If he wanted to kill me, it would be almost effortless. However, he had chosen the most troublesome method. First, he had controlled me and the pupil snake spirit, then he had used a killing move that had taken a lot of time to prepare. He had wanted to torture my mind and make me feel despair, before finally dying in fear. My heart gradually turned cold. Looking at the bottomless whirlpool above my head, despair spread uncontrollably from the bottom of my heart. "I'm afraid I'm doomed this time, right?" I smiled bitterly. I didn't know what terrifying thing the whirlpool would summon, but I was powerless to resist. "Everything is over. Zhou-yi, now you should feel my despair and fear. When you almost killed me, you should have been prepared to be torn into pieces by me. At the Young Phoenix gathering, you weren't a young phoenix genius. But cultivation doesn't look at the beginning, but the ending. Your ending is to die in my hands. Reincarnate well in your next life." "No, you don't have a next life. I will capture your soul and use a secret technique to refine it." Lu Zhenyang's blood-colored young god's face became more and more ferocious. He looked at me fiercely, as if he had gone crazy. "Do you know, I have imagined killing you countless times, but I didn't expect it to come so quickly. Zhou-yi, I have specially prepared dozens of ways to refine your soul for you. Let me tell you, death is not liberation, but the beginning of endless torture." As soon as he said that, the blood-colored young god let out a breath and suddenly raised his hand. Two intertwined black and red energy shot out from his fingertips and headed straight for the black whirlpool above his head. "Die." The two energy shot into the black whirlpool. The whirlpool became faster and faster, as if it had eaten a tonic. The whirlpool suddenly expanded. Then, a black cloud enveloped. In the middle of the black cloud, a small red dot appeared. The dot was inconspicuous at first, but it grew larger and larger, gradually turning into an eye. It was a blood-red eye. Black smoke formed the eyelids and eyelids. The blood-red eyeball and the white of the eye seemed to be real, and I could clearly see the blood vessels on it. Thin streaks of lightning flashed across his eyes, and under the lightning were countless rolling and flowing red lights, so red that it seemed as if blood could drip from them. As soon as the eye appeared, I felt my body shake, as if I was being stared at by a primordial beast. I couldn't help but tremble. The blood-red eye trembled a few times, and in an instant, there was another wave of black smoke. It seemed to blink, and when it opened its eyes, a red light shot out from the pupil. It followed the direction of its gaze, which was where I was, and shot straight down. In that red light there was an irresistible power hidden. This was a terrifying power that was completely beyond my understanding. It even surpassed the shock that Yan Nanshan's young god had given me. Only the sacrificial evil spirit in the Yinshang royal tomb had given me such a feeling. However, it was meaningless to think about the strength of his power. No matter what, I couldn't escape death. I stared at Lu Zhenyang and ignored the red light. My heart was filled with unwillingness. Why did he reach the young god's celestial master level in the devil refining gourd? If Lu Zhenyang was still a celestial master, even if he had the Chiyu battle axe with my forward seal, Tong, the snake spirit, and the fatty and Zhang Kanwan, I wouldn't dare to say that we could easily defeat him, but we could at least be on par with him. But now, facing Lu Zhenyang who had condensed his young god, I couldn't do anything. After all, he was at a higher realm, and the power and true essence he used were not on the same level. I had just become a celestial master, and my power wasn't stable yet. After Lu Zhenyang had blocked my sword light, I was doomed to fail. I couldn't accept this. I hadn't taken revenge for my parents yet, and I was going to die in the hands of my enemy. I was going to drag a bunch of my close friends into this. How could I accept this? However, everything didn't move according to my will. The red light slowly but firmly pressed down, carrying the aura of death as it pressed down on me. The first of the 8 trigrams, the 6 elements of the world, the first line wheel rises. Suddenly, I heard a faint voice from the corner of the room. I turned around and saw the fatty with his eyes closed. He was holding something in his hand as he muttered something. Soul returning 8 trigrams, details. The fatty clasped his hands together and opened his eyes. His eyes shone brightly. Then, he roared and threw the thing in his hand out. I only saw that thing flash past in front of me, blocking the red light between me and myself. In the next second, the red light collided with it. I didn't hear any sound of collision, but I felt an indescribable power explode in front of me and engulf the entire room. What did you do? Lu Zhenyang's blood-colored young god was shocked. He waved his hand and shot a streak of true yuan that pierced through the fatty's shoulder. The fatty coughed out a mouthful of blood, but he still wore a smile on his face. Damn, I'm risking everything. I didn't have time to care about the fatty's injury. I looked up and saw a milky white shell that was emitting a gentle light a few palms away from me. It blocked the red light that was emitting the aura of death. The red light enveloped the shell and flashed for a few seconds before slowly disappearing. The dark clouds above the blood-colored young god's head slowly dispersed, and the bloody hand that was controlling me retracted back into the ground. My body suddenly regained its freedom. I couldn't react in time and knelt on the ground, panting heavily. Ding-dang, ding-dang. A few pieces of the broken shell fell in front of me. I slowly reached out and picked one up. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was this small shell that had blocked the attack that had almost surpassed the young gods? This thing. At this moment, the blood-colored young god floated back into Lu Zhenyang's body. Lu Zhenyang opened his eyes and looked at the shell fragment in my hand in shock. He couldn't help but exclaim, "An ancient coin? How was it? How's my skill?" The fatty coughed out another mouthful of blood. He smiled bitterly and said to me, "Third baby, I'll leave the rest to you." Before he could finish his sentence, he fell to the ground and didn't move. Seeing the fatty fall to the ground, my heart clenched. The fatty was my childhood friend. Although I didn't know what the shell was, there was no doubt that it was something the fatty kept to save his life. It was likely that his master, Zhenren Guan, had given it to him. I didn't know how precious it was, but he had used it on me. The snake spirit and Tong Tong were still lying on the ground, but I gritted my teeth and stood up. I shook my arms, and the surging true yuan surged from my heaven meridians. "Zhou-yi, you're really tenacious." Lu Zhenyang gritted his teeth, and his tone became colder. "Until now, there are still people saving you. But let's see how many times this ancient treasure can save you." "Once is enough." I lowered my head and softly spat out a sentence. The fatty had almost used his life to find an opportunity for me. How could I not cherish it? Just now, in order to torture me, Lu Zhenyang had used Chiyo's secret technique. The terrifying attack from the blood-colored young god had almost surpassed the young god realm. Even if Lu Zhenyang had a great opportunity, it had only been a few days since he had come out of Chiyo's tomb. At most, he had just become a young god celestial master. Just now, how many times could he use that Taoist art? It was still unknown who would be the winner. Let's try. Let's see what other tricks a trash like you has. Lu Zhenyang smiled in disdain and raised his head to look at me. Lu Zhenyang and I stood opposite each other, ready to fight at any moment. However, at that moment there was a shout from outside the house. "Hey, the thief inside! Quickly hand over the monster!" The voice was full of energy. Lu Zhenyang and I moved our gazes and looked outside the house. Outside the door, there were a few Taoist priests wearing Taoist robes and their hair was combed into a bun. They looked sage-like and righteous. People from the Celestial Master sect? I was stunned at first, but then I remembered what Wang Li's mother had said. Why did this bunch of cowardly noses come here at this time? The few Taoists shouted a few times. Seeing that there was no response from inside the house, they looked at each other and seemed to be on guard. They didn't enter the house directly, but raised their hands and shot a streak of true essence at the door, forcefully blasting it open. I glanced from afar. Heavenly Master sect really put in a lot of effort this time, sending 3 Heavenly Masters. However, it made sense. According to what they knew, Zhang Kanwen was the only enemy here who could use a secret technique to barely reach the power of a Heavenly Master. Actually, sending 1 or 2 Heavenly Masters was more than enough, but they sent 3. I could only say that although this bunch of cowardly old Taoists were arrogant, they were also very cautious. Quickly search and see if they ran away. The Heavenly Master Realm Taoist, who was the leader, entered first. He waved his sleeves and a peachwood sword appeared in his hand. There were crisscrossing talismans on it, and it looked really extraordinary. Yes, martial uncle. The few young Taoists who followed behind him responded and dispersed to look for him. The old Taoist nodded and looked around with the sword in his hand. He seemed to feel that something was wrong and walked directly to the house we were in. Chapter 558. Who are you? The old Taoist immediately looked at Lu Zhenyang. At this moment, out of the few people standing in the room, the fatty and Zhang Kanwen were lying on the ground on their last breath. Tong Tong looked like an ordinary little girl. As for the snake spirit and I, although we looked fine, we were much more ordinary compared to Lu Zhenyang. Lu Zhenyang was currently wearing a black robe. If you looked closely, you would see that it was densely embroidered with all sorts of patterns. I remembered that when I first met him in Chio's tomb, this robe was just an ordinary black and didn't have so many complicated patterns. It seemed like this was one of the benefits of Chio's inheritance. Perhaps it was because of the spell that his black robe had a faint blood light flowing on it. With the addition of the intimidating iron mask, Lu Zhenyang was like a blazing sun at this moment. Lu Zhenyang didn't bother with the old Taoist and frowned in disdain. He snorted and turned his head to the side. This poor Taoist is asking you a question. Seeing Lu Zhenyang ignore him, the old Taoist was instantly enraged. He flipped his sleeves and revealed a pair of old palms. He waved them in the air and the peachwood sword flew up, aiming at Lu Zhenyang's face. Lu Zhenyang saw that the old Taoist had taken the initiative to attack him. He raised his eyebrows and found it interesting. My heart jumped. Although this old Taoist was at the Sky Master realm, he was undoubtedly the most ordinary one. Lu Zhenyang didn't even need to use Chio's inheritance treasure. He just needed to flick his finger and he would be able to crush him to death. Lu Zhenyang and the old Taoists of Dragon Tiger Mountain were my enemies. Seeing them bite and tear each other apart was exactly what I wanted. Thus, I didn't say anything and waited for them to come into contact. Lu Zhenyang's eyes glowed red and he looked like he was about to attack. However, at this moment, a shout came from behind the old Taoist. "Martial uncle, it's that person." It was a young Taoist who noticed the situation and followed them in. This young Taoist was in his 20s. After entering, he pointed at the unconscious Zhang Kanwen on the ground. "It's him. He protected that demon infant time and time again and even injured us." Demon infant? When I heard him call me that, I was startled. Then, I realized that he was talking about little Wang Li. Longhu Mountain had always prided itself on the righteous path, and those who went against it were naturally demons. The old Taoist could also feel Lu Zhenyang's tremendous aura. His eyes were bewildered. After hesitating for a while, he turned around and let Lu Zhenyang go. He looked at us with a serious face and said, "You guys, hurry up and hand over the demon infant. The Heavenly Master of Mount Longhu wants to attack a baby. If this gets out, people will laugh at you." I looked at the old Taoist priest and sneered. The old Taoist discreetly took a step away from Lu Zhenyang. His gaze became even more dignified as he said righteously, "Baby? Your Excellency is also a cultivator, can't you see the evil in this baby's body? Let me tell you, slaying demons and devils is the duty of my Mount Longhu." Hurry up and hand over the demon infant so this humble Taoist can purify it and kill it. Don't even think of trying to stop a chariot like a mantis. My Mount Longhu's glorious heavenly might is not something you can resist. Glorious heavenly might? I glanced at Lu Zhenyang and saw that he was standing to the side. He seemed to want to watch the show and didn't care about the old Taoist priest's provocation. I sighed and swung my sleeves. True energy surged out of my body. If you want to eliminate demons and protect the righteous path, let's see if your Mount Longhu has the ability or not. To be honest, I didn't know how to deal with Lu Zhenyang alone. Now, there were several heavenly masters from Mount Longhu. The situation was extremely dangerous. At this moment, I had no other choice but to try my best. As for the result, I didn't want to think too much about it. You're also a heavenly master? The old Taoist priest squinted his eyes and looked at Lu Zhenyang cautiously. Seeing that he didn't have any intention of helping me, he calmed down and said, "Kid, I can see that you've stepped onto the path of a heavenly master at such a young age. Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't try to resist. If you hand over the demon infant, this humble Taoist will spare your life." Hearing this, I found it funny. Since when did the people from Mount Longhu start to reason with others? He must have noticed that Lu Zhenyang wasn't an ordinary person and was hesitant about Lu Zhenyang's position. He didn't dare to take the risk and used the safest method to persuade me to surrender. However, this time, he wasn't the only one from Mount Longhu. He chose to be cautious, but the other two heavenly masters didn't. "Senior, don't waste your breath on this evil creature." At this moment, a middle-aged Taoist priest walked out from behind the old Taoist priest. This Taoist priest had a square face and an extraordinary aura. He looked quite dignified. After walking side by side to the old Taoist priest, the middle-aged Taoist priest said, "Since you're protecting the demon infant, you've also fallen into the demonic path. Capture them and hand them over to the Heavenly Master Mansion to deal with." I frowned as I watched the middle-aged Taoist priest walk over. This person was obviously stronger than the old Taoist priest. The old Taoist priest was only at the early stage of the Heavenly Master realm, similar to me. This middle-aged Taoist priest's cultivation was at least at the late stage of the Heavenly Master realm, and he was infinitely close to the peak stage. Moreover, Mount Longhu's cultivation technique was extraordinary. This middle-aged Taoist priest's combat power was close to that of a young god heavenly master. If it was just the old Taoist priest, I was confident that I could easily defeat him. However, with the person in front of me, I would have to put in a lot of effort to defeat him. Even with the help of the snake spirit and Tong Tong, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. "And you?" Just as I was getting more and more anxious, a sharp voice came from behind the two of them. I was stunned and looked over. A skinny young Taoist priest wearing a luxurious Taoist robe walked in. This person wore an arrogant expression. I didn't know how he had noticed Lu Zhenyang, but as soon as he walked in, he put his hands on his waist and pointed at Lu Zhenyang aggressively. "I can tell that you're not a good person at first glance. Your blood energy is thick, so you must have killed before. Be honest and tell me where you came from. Also, take out everything on your body and let me check if you have anything to do with the demons." This person seemed to be used to being arrogant. He thought for a moment and added, "Kid, let me tell you. The people in front of you are 3 celestial masters of Mount Longhu. If you dare to disobey, I will let you see the methods of Mount Longhu to slay demons." When the old Taoist priest saw his companion speak like that, his expression turned solemn. Just as he was about to say something, the middle-aged Taoist priest spoke first. He nodded and stared at Lu Zhenyang. "Junior brother is right. This person is filled with evil energy. He must be related to the demon infant. We must investigate him." As an expert close to young God's celestial master, it was impossible for them to not see Lu Zhenyang's strong aura. However, in the world of metaphysics, Mount Longhu had always been an important existence. The celestial masters of Celestial Master sect were arrogant. In their eyes, no matter how strong Lu Zhenyang was, he had to retreat when he heard the name of Mount Longhu. Moreover, Mount Longhu's reputation wasn't undeserved. There were 3 celestial masters. Even if a normal Yang God celestial master met 3 experienced celestial masters of Mount Longhu, it was hard to say who would win. They obviously weren't afraid of Lu Zhenyang doing anything. Only the old Taoist seemed to be cautious, but he only frowned and didn't stop the other 2. It was obvious that he had the same thoughts. This situation seemed to be interesting. I turned to look at Lu Zhenyang and thought for a moment. I didn't forget to add oil to the fire and asked, "Celestial elders, do I have to be investigated too?" Of course. The skinny celestial master was the most arrogant and nodded. Although this person's cultivation wasn't as high as the middle-aged Taoist, the Taoist robe he wore was the most luxurious. It was a pity that he was too skinny and the Taoist robe he wore looked loose as if it was hanging on his body. It was quite funny. He raised his head and looked at me with his nostrils. He seemed to be satisfied with my attitude and said, "This time, our goal is the demon infant. We can let you people who helped the wicked go, but to prevent any mistakes you have to be checked. If we find anything related to the demon path, we have to bring it back to Mount Longhu." Something related to the demon path? I knew that this person wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to rob us. However, I deliberately pretended that I didn't know. With a slightly angry expression, I said, "We don't have anything related to the demonic path. Why are we being searched?" "You don't have anything?" The skinny Taoist laughed and revealed a mocking expression. "We will only know if we have anything related to the demon path after the check. Letting you live is already an act of mercy. If you continue to pester us, this Taoist will be the first to kill you." This person's behavior gave me a glimmer of hope. I turned my eyes and had an idea. I pointed at Lu Zhenyang and said, "I don't have anything related to the demon path, but he does. He has an extremely powerful magic treasure that can release the power of the sun god. Every time it appears, black smoke surges. It's obviously related to the demon path." I knew the skinny Taoist's motive, so I deliberately pointed out the power of the magic treasure. The power of the sun god? Extremely powerful? The skinny Taoist's eyes narrowed, revealing a glint. Just as I thought, he simply didn't care that the magic treasure I mentioned was related to the demonic path. The corner of his mouth hooked into a smile as he walked towards Lu Zhenyang and sternly said, "Brat, hand over the thing he mentioned." At this time, the old Taoist saw his companion's unscrupulous behavior and felt that something was wrong. He frowned and tried to stop him, but the middle-aged Taoist stopped him. "Senior brother, don't worry." The middle-aged Taoist seemed to be very confident in his cultivation. He didn't turn his back on us and calmly said, "With me here, I'm not afraid of them playing any tricks." When the skinny Taoist heard that the middle-aged Taoist was also on his side, his imposing manner increased. He stared at Lu Zhenyang and said, "I'll give you 3 breaths. If you don't hand it over, this Taoist will have no choice but to treat you as an evil creature from the demon path and send you to the afterlife." Lu Zhenyang still didn't say anything. He just stood there quietly and looked at the skinny Taoist with impatience in his eyes. Seeing this scene, I couldn't help but feel happy. As expected of someone from Longhu Mountain. If it was someone from any other force, they wouldn't be so unscrupulous. After these people arrived, from Lu Zhenyang's actions, it was obvious that he knew that these people were here to cause trouble for me. Thus, he was happy to watch the monkey show from the side. Who knew that these people would target him now? With Lu Zhenyang's personality and cultivation, it was impossible for him to explain. Next, these people from Longhu Mountain would have to bear the anger of Celestial Master Yang Shun. Let's fight. It's best if we fight until both sides are injured. Only then can little Wang Li and I hope to survive. I watched quietly from the side, and a bit of hope rose in my heart. 3 breaths passed in a flash. When the skinny Taoist saw that Lu Zhenyang didn't have the slightest reaction, he couldn't help but get angry. With a wave of his hand, a black iron sword appeared in his hand. Brat, you have guts. This Taoist will send you to the afterlife. After saying that, he raised his hand and stabbed towards Lu Zhenyang, who knew that just as he stabbed forward, it was as if he hit an invisible wall. Not only did his body not reach Lu Zhenyang's side, but he also flew backwards and fell to the ground. The skinny Taoist screamed and his face couldn't help but turn red. Brat, you have some skills. After saying that, he seemed to realize that Lu Zhenyang wasn't easy to deal with. His eyes turned and he didn't attack Lu Zhenyang anymore. Instead, he turned to look at the middle-aged Taoist. Senior brother, this brat's skills are strange. He must be related to the demon infant. Let's attack together. We must kill this bastard today. The skinny Taoist shouted twice but realized that no one was paying attention to him. He looked surprised. At this moment, the middle-aged Taoist with the highest cultivation, who was also the senior brother that the skinny monkey was talking about, had a slight change in expression. He ignored the skinny Taoist and only stared at Lu Zhenyang. I also raised my eyes to look at Lu Zhenyang. At this moment, Lu Zhenyang was still standing at the same spot. However, a small blood-red person floated above his head, Yang Shin body. Chapter 559. You said you want to search my body? Lu Zhenyang had a blood-colored yang god above his head. His expression was calm, but there was a hint of blood hidden in his eyes. The anger in his heart had already been ignited by the thin Taoist priest. You still want to detain my treasure? Following his words, the blood-red yang god moved. It slowly raised its small hand and lowered its palm. Yang God Heavenly Master! The most cautious old Taoist priest was the first to react and exclaimed. Misunderstanding, Senior, this is a misunderstanding. The old Taoist priest was sweating profusely as he stuttered to explain. Misunderstanding? Lu Zhenyang sighed and slowly shook his head. It's not a misunderstanding. You're right, I've already become a demon. The middle-aged Taoist priest finally became serious. Although his cultivation was close to the peak of the Heavenly Master stage, he was still inferior to Lu Zhenyang's Yang God Heavenly Master. However, he was still unyielding. He stared at Lu Zhenyang and gritted his teeth. Senior, this time, our Dragon Tiger Mountain had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. However, it is also a fact that you are related to the demon infant. How about this, we each take a step back and say our goodbyes? Each take a step back? Lu Zhenyang laughed mockingly. The blood-colored yang god suddenly opened its eyes, and a trace of fierceness flashed across its eyes. With a wave of its small hand, a thick and solid stream of true essence gushed out and struck the middle-aged Taoist priest's chest. The middle-aged Taoist priest's expression changed drastically. He formed a seal with both hands in an attempt to stop it, but Lu Zhenyang's yang god was not ordinary. This attack was extremely fast, and the middle-aged Taoist priest had no time to dodge. Crack! Following a few crisp sounds, the middle-aged Taoist priest's chest caved in as if it had been hit by a heavy hammer. The middle-aged Taoist priest's eyes widened as he stared at Lu Zhenyang in disbelief. Then, he slowly retreated a few steps and spat out a mouthful of blood. He slowly fell backwards. His eyes were lifeless and his breathing was hanging by a thread. Although he wasn't dead, he wasn't far from it. Junior brother! The old Taoist priest screamed and immediately fell on the middle-aged Taoist priest's corpse. They were from the same branch of the Celestial Master sect. Although the middle-aged Taoist priest was not as senior as him, his cultivation was the highest among the 3 Celestial Masters. He had always been regarded as the pride and hope by the old Taoist priest. He did not expect to be so seriously injured today. Even if he did not die, his cultivation would definitely regress after he recovered. The old Taoist priest's expression changed, and he could not hide the hatred in his eyes. However, the middle-aged Taoist priest was the strongest among them. What he could not do. The middle-aged Taoist priest was the strongest, and he could not do. After a moment of silence, the old Taoist said with a pale face, "We're just a few ordinary celestial masters of Dragon Tiger Mountain. Of course, you can do whatever you want in front of us. However, every celestial master of Dragon Tiger Mountain has a life jade slip. If we die here, Celestial Master Zhang will definitely pursue the matter. Senior, you should be appeased by now." Lu Zhenyang frowned. After the trip to the Yinshang Royal Mausoleum, he had almost cut off contact with the Lu family. Just as he said, he had fallen into the devil's path. Even so, he had to think twice when Taoist priest mentioned Zhang Tianshir's name. Just as he was hesitating, the skinny Taoist suddenly ran out, fell to his knees, and repeatedly kowtowed to Lu Zhenyang. "Senior, please spare my life. I had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. I have a Taoist sword that was bestowed to me by my father. It's powerful, and I also have talismans. Senior, as long as you spare my life, I will give you all of these treasures." After saying that, he took out the black iron sword from before and continuously took out talismans from his body, respectfully handing them over to Lu Zhenyang. I gawked and dropped my jaw. Ever since Lu Zhenyang revealed his yang spirit, the skinny Taoist had been hiding in the back. I thought that he would run away while the two senior brothers were talking to Lu Zhenyang. I didn't expect that he would directly kneel in front of Lu Zhenyang. I didn't know how to describe how arrogant he was just now. "Junior brother, what are you doing? Stand up." The old Taoist priest's face turned red when he saw his junior brother's behavior. It was unknown whether he was angry or embarrassed. "Senior brother, you should also kneel down." Who would have thought that the skinny Taoist priest was even weirder than I thought? Not only was he shameless, he even called the old Taoist priest over. This time, the old Taoist priest was completely stunned. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his face instantly turned pale. He looked at the skinny Taoist priest and was silent for a moment. Suddenly, he smiled bitterly and said, "Junior brother, your actions have put the dignity of our Longhu Mountain to shame." Then, the old Taoist priest waved his sleeves. His clothes fluttered even though there was no wind, and the peachwood sword flew up. The old Taoist priest clenched his teeth and smiled bitterly. He stared at Lu Zhenyang and said, "Forget it. This old Taoist priest doesn't care about my life, but I can't lose the face of my Longhu Mountain." The peachwood sword slowly stopped in the air. The old Taoist priest waved his hand and rushed towards Lu Zhenyang with his sword. "Demon, die!" Looking at the old Taoist priest's suicidal attack, I couldn't help but sigh. Longhu Mountain's Celestial Master sect had existed for more than 100 years. Even though there were many scum, in terms of Tao heart, most of the disciples of Longhu Mountain were very firm. At this time, Lu Zhenyang didn't have a choice. Seeing the old Taoist priest rush towards him, his blood-colored yang spirit snorted coldly. He stretched out his hands and slowly drew circles in the air. A dark purple ball appeared out of nowhere. "Since it's like this, then die." Lu Zhenyang's voice didn't have a trace of emotion. The dark purple ball of True Yuan trembled slightly and rushed towards the old Taoist priest like lightning. The two silently collided in the air. The blackish-purple true essence directly passed through the old Taoist's body and flew towards the few glory of consciousness realm young Taoists behind him who were dumbstruck. Then, it exploded with a loud rumble. Pring! The old Taoist priest's body stopped in the air and suddenly stopped moving. After 1 or 2 seconds there was a light sound. Cracks actually appeared in the middle of the old Taoist priest's body. Then, they became bigger and bigger. His entire body split into pieces, flesh and blood splattering everywhere. When the skinny Taoist saw his senior brother's tragic death, the fear on his face intensified and his legs began to tremble. However, he quickly adjusted himself and his face regained its ingratiating expression. "Senior, you should be appeased now, right? Senior, as long as you let me go, I promise that Longhu Mountain will not pursue this matter. Senior, please don't doubt me. My father is the great elder of Longhu Mountain. Even Celestial Master Zhang has to give some face." Lu Zhenyang coldly looked at the skinny Taoist priest. The blood-colored Yang spirit flashed like lightning and arrived in an instant. Then, he raised his small hand and lightly pressed down. "Ah! Don't!" The skinny Taoist priest let out a shrill scream, but it was of no use. A mass of blood-red true essence fell from the sky and poured into the skinny Taoist priest's body through the baihui on top of his head. His entire body shook and he softly fell to the ground. After killing the two, Lu Zhenyang flicked his sleeves. The middle-aged Taoist priest, who had been seriously injured and fell to the ground, instantly lost his life. The other young Taoist priests, whose strength was below that of the Celestial Master, were all killed. I couldn't help but sigh as I looked at the ground floor that had been destroyed by the fire. I had achieved my goal of provoking them to kill each other. However, who would have thought that Lu Zhenyang would be so tyrannical? The people of Longhu Mountain couldn't even withstand a single blow. However, Lu Zhenyang must have consumed a lot of energy. This kind of person deserves to die. Don't you think so, Zhou? Lu Zhenyang's blood-colored Yang spirit flew back to his body. He twisted his waist and stood up. He turned his head and looked at me with his horrifying iron mask. "Indeed, they deserve to die." I sighed and said, "I've seen Longhu Mountain's tyrannical and shameless people in the past, but after seeing them again today, I found that they were still considered good." "Yes." Lu Zhenyang nodded in agreement and said with a face of pity, "However, it seems that I won't be able to kill you today, right? You can try." I smiled confidently and raised my hand to raise the Xianyuan sword case. Speaking of which, I have to thank those old Taoists of Longhu Mountain. If it weren't for them, my Tao Qi and true essence wouldn't have recovered so quickly. As for you, Lu Zhenyang, you've already left your body twice today, and used up so much true essence. I'm afraid that you're already at the end of your rope, right? Lu Zhenyang was indeed incomparably powerful, but I didn't forget that he had just advanced to Yang God's Celestial Master. It had only been a few days since Lu Zhenyang came out of Chio's tomb. Even if Lu Zhenyang had advanced to Yang God as soon as possible, his current realm wouldn't be stable. Frequently leaving his body with the Yang spirit was also a great consumption for him. "I'm not at the end of my rope, but it's more than enough to deal with you." Lu Zhenyang's expression was cold. I sneered and looked back at him without flinching. At the same time, I urged my Tao Qi and true essence to pour into the sword case. The Xianyuan sword let out a light buzzing sound. Lu Zhenyang was silent. He should understand that I wasn't lying. In the current situation, neither of us could do anything to the other. If we forcefully made a move, the only result would be that both of us would be injured, or even perish together. I was betting that Lu Zhenyang wouldn't be willing to give up. Now that he was ahead of me by an entire realm, he would have many opportunities to kill me in the future. How could he be willing to perish together with me? Lu Zhenyang was silent for a while before he slowly said, "Give me the devil refining gourd and we'll call it a day." "Devil refining gourd?" I sneered. "Don't you think you're being too greedy? My Chiyu axe is still in the devil refining gourd." Lu Zhenyang raised his eyes. He wasn't in a hurry as he slowly said, "If you aren't willing to obediently hand over the devil refining gourd, then I'll risk my life to end the grudge between us today." "The Chiyu axe is still in the devil refining gourd?" I frowned. No wonder he would rather leave his yang spirit several times than use the extraordinarily powerful Chiyu axe today. It was also because of this that he had consumed so much energy. After thinking for a while, I finally agreed. All right, the devil refining gourd is yours. Zhou-yi, our matter is far from over. Lu Zhenyang grabbed the devil refining gourd and strode out. I could vaguely hear his voice. The next time we meet, it will be the time to kill you. At the same time, on Mount Longhu, in a side hall of the Celestial Master sect, a skinny old man sat quietly on a futon. Beside him were rows of jade slips. There seemed to be no wind flowing in the entire hall, and even the light was frozen. Suddenly, there was a slight cracking sound from the top row, and it happened 3 times in a row. The old man suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes flashed with a light that didn't match his appearance. He looked at the pieces of jade falling in front of him. This is the Celestial Master's jade slips. The old man's expression changed. He picked up the pieces in the air and gently rubbed them in his hand. Chapter 560. As soon as Lu Zhenyang left, I sat on the ground. Although I had recovered my primordial qi during the fight between Lu Zhenyang and the Taoist from Mount Longhu, my body that was severely injured by Lu Zhenyang didn't recover. After sitting down, I sat cross-legged and circulated my primordial qi to nourish my body. When I woke up again, my injuries were temporarily suppressed. However, when I moved my body, I felt that every bone and joint in my body was aching. After moving a little more, I felt more comfortable. I propped myself up and looked around. The broken furniture from the fight had been cleaned. Although it wasn't restored to its original state, it was more or less organized. In the living room, Wang Yongjun and Wang Kuan were chatting on the chairs. When they saw me enter, they stood up. "Brother Zhou, how are you?" Wang Yongjun pulled my hand and asked anxiously. "I heard from Wang Kuan that someone came to seek revenge today. After a fierce battle you were injured." It wasn't just a fierce battle. Before I could say anything, Zhang Kanwen seemed to have heard the commotion. He walked over and patted my shoulder. "Zhou-yi, will that guy come back? He shouldn't be for a while." I shook my head and comforted him. Lu Zhenyang used up a lot of energy today. Moreover, the 3 masters from the Celestial Master sect died. It's impossible that Mount Longhu didn't notice. They will most likely find Lu Zhenyang. He won't be able to deal with us for the time being. Zhang Kanwen heaved a sigh of relief. His furrowed eyebrows relaxed slightly. He nodded. "That's good. At least we can take a breather." Then, he turned to ask me. "Lu Zhenyang is so arrogant. Is there no one in the Metaphysics Society to stop him?" After President Gu passed away, Vice President Yang took over as the president. "I'm going to call the Metaphysics Society to ask what they have to say." Vice President Yang? It should be Yang Shilong. So he took over as the Metaphysics Society's president. I hesitated for a while before shaking my head at Zhang Kanwen. "Don't ask. Lu Zhenyang's cultivation is extraordinary. The Metaphysics Society can't control him. Moreover, looking at Lu Zhenyang, I'm afraid that he has completely separated himself from the Lu family. Otherwise, he wouldn't have killed the Celestial Master of Mount Longhu." Zhang Kanwen was stunned. After a moment of silence, he finally nodded dejectedly. Lu Zhenyang's cultivation was too high, so high that even the Metaphysics Association couldn't interfere. Zhang Kanwen and I couldn't do anything about it, so we could only take it one step at a time. I looked around and asked Zhang Kanwen, "Where are the corpses of the Taoist priests from Mount Longhu? How did you handle it?" Zhang Kanwen pointed at Wang Yongjun. "Uncle Wang is here to help with this." Wang Yongjun interrupted. "I found a few people and got a few funeral home cars to preserve the bodies of the Taoist priests. We went all the way to Eagle Lake in Jiangxi and sent them to Mount Longhu." I was bewildered. I thought he would tell me to throw the body somewhere else. I didn't expect him to have such thoughts. The murderer, Lu Zhenyang, was also sent back to Mount Longhu. This should prevent Mount Longhu from pursuing responsibility to the greatest extent, right? Just as I relaxed a little, I furrowed my brows again. According to Mount Longhu's style of doing things, even if we sent the bodies back, I'm afraid they wouldn't let it go. Perhaps seeing my strange expression, Zhang Kanwen said, "Zhou-yi, don't worry. Uncle Wang found some outlaws. They don't know the situation here, nor do they know what's in the funeral car. They don't even know Uncle Wang's identity. Even if the people from Mount Longhu search their souls, they won't be able to implicate us." After hearing his explanation, I felt relieved. Zhang Kanwen understood the methods of the Metaphysics Association very well. Since he had decided to send the bodies back to Mount Longhu, there shouldn't be any mistakes. I didn't mention it. I looked around and asked him, "How are the others? Where's the fatty?" "It's not a big deal. He's just exhausted and has consumed too much Taoist energy. He's cultivating upstairs." I nodded, feeling slightly guilty. At that time, the situation was urgent. I didn't even discuss with the fatty before giving the monster refining gourd to Lu Zhenyang. Speaking of which, the monster refining gourd belonged to the fatty. I didn't have the right to deal with it. I felt sorry for the fatty. I could only find a chance in the future to get the monster refining gourd back and return it to the fatty. Besides that, the qilin was still in the monster refining gourd. I didn't have time to call the qilin out of the monster refining gourd in a hurry. Lu Zhenyang wasn't the owner of the monster refining gourd, so it was unlikely that he could activate the monster refining gourd. As long as the qilin hid inside and didn't come out, it shouldn't be a big deal. As I thought about it in a daze, my hatred for Lu Zhenyang grew. It was a pity that Yang God Celestial Master's cultivation was like a natural moat. I couldn't even think of taking revenge. Just as I was feeling depressed and thinking about these things, Wang Yongjun suddenly asked me, "Mr. Zhou, I heard from Kanwen that Wang Li's illness can be cured?" Hearing that, I retracted my thoughts and nodded. "I have some clues. After coming back, I was distracted by Mount Longhu and Lu Zhenyang, so I had forgotten the most important thing." After sorting out my thoughts, I told him, "Now that I've become a celestial master and I've found the 7-star mugwort, we'll know if I can cure Wang Li's illness later. It's hard to say if he can be cured, but at the very least, he can temporarily suppress it and delay it for some time." That's good, that's good." Wang Yongjun rubbed his hands excitedly. The gratitude on his face was beyond words. In fact, I was also very grateful to Wang Yongjun. Ever since I'd first come to Shenzhen, he'd helped me a lot. This time, it was thanks to his help with the Celestial Master's corpse in Mount Longhu. Otherwise, although Zhang Kanwen and I had high cultivation, we wouldn't have known how to deal with it. In the end, we'd most likely have to abandon this feng shui metaphysics shop and hide elsewhere. Sometimes, the methods of the mortal world were more useful than metaphysical method. Zhang Kanwen stood up and patted my shoulder. "Wang Li's illness shouldn't be delayed any longer. How are you now? If you're fine, let's get started." I nodded. Although my body was still a little sore, my cultivation had completely recovered. It wouldn't affect my handling of Wang Li's matter. I followed Zhang Kanwen upstairs to Wang Li's room. When I pushed the door open, Wang Li was lying motionless on the crib. Wang Kuen's wife was sitting beside him. "I'll use my family's secret technique to warm Wang Li's body first." Then, Zhang Kanwen turned over and sat cross-legged on the bed. Zhang Kanwen gently raised his hand, and the yin-yang yama brush rose into the air. It tapped a few times in the air, and dense Taoist energy gushed out, wrapping around Wang Li. Zhang Kanwen's expression was solemn. He formed a seal with both hands and chanted a series of incantations. The yin-yang yama brush seemed to have a mind of its own. It swayed a few times in the air and flew toward Wang Li. At this time, Wang Li also woke up. He opened his eyes wide and looked curiously at the yin-yang yama brush dancing in front of him. Zhang Canwen's family's secret technique was quite mysterious. The Taoist energy flowed exquisitely, just like a precise instrument. Every wisp of Taoist energy was used properly, without a single bit of it being wasted. The yin-yang yama brush glided around Wang Li's body, as if it was being controlled by an invisible hand. It slid across Wang Li's body as if it was writing. It looked very rhythmic. While the yin-yang yama brush was drawing, transparent waves appeared in the air. They gradually condensed into 7 colored lines that floated in the air. I looked at Zhang Canwen's temples, which had beads of sweat trickling down. I couldn't help but feel moved. This fellow had been injured before. Even if he only used his family's secret technique to nourish Wang Li's body, it wouldn't be easy for him. The lines slowly pressed down. After more than 10 minutes, they finally fell and melted into Wang Li's skin, faintly flashing. After seeing Zhang Canwen finish casting his technique, I asked, "Big brother Zhang, how's the situation?" "It's still the same." Zhang Canwen shook his head with a dejected look on his face. "This spell of mine is about using softness to overcome hardness, using a gentle force to nourish the body and bones. However, the evil aura in Wang Li's body is too strong. Before the nourishing force can take effect, the evil thing has already dispersed most of it. The effect it can have is really limited. What about the 7-star mugwort? How do I use it?" I nodded and asked him. "I'll have to rely on you." Zhang Canwen looked solemn. "Later, I'll use a technique to activate the 7-star mugwort. Then, you'll use your shaman energy to pour the energy of the 7-star mugwort into Wang Li's body and gather it on the black spots." "Okay." I nodded and took out the 7-star mugwort from my pocket and gave it to Zhang Canwen. Zhang Canwen took the 7-star mugwort and gently slid his fingers along the stem. A wisp of Taoist energy flowed from his fingertips to the 7-star mugwort. Just then, something strange happened. The 7-star mugwort was originally just an ordinary blade of grass. The only difference was the faint star spots on it. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to tell it apart when it was placed in a pile of mugwort. However, after coming into contact with Zhang Canwen's Taoist energy, the 7-star mugwort suddenly emitted a 5-colored light. The light flickered a few times before slowly fading away. I saw 7 shining light spots on the stem of the mugwort. When I looked closely, I saw 7 white lumps that seemed to have grown out of the stem. Zhang Canwen stretched out 2 fingers and gently pinched the mugwort as he asked, "Do you find this 7-star familiar?" I looked up and saw that the arrangement of the 7 stars was indeed familiar. It was exactly the same as the Big Dipper. "Yes, it's the Big Dipper." Zhang Canwen sighed and looked at the 7-star mugwort in his hand with a nostalgic expression. "When I first started cultivating with Master, he taught me how to recognize the strange flowers and plants in the metaphysics world. The first one I recognized was this 7-star mugwort. Master said that the 7-star mugwort was formed when a wisp of the energy of the stars in the sky drifted to the human world and was absorbed by ordinary mugwort. The past is still vivid in my mind, but now things are the same, but people have changed." I didn't expect Zhang Canwen to suddenly mention this. I didn't know how to respond, so I patted his shoulder to comfort him. "Now, it's the 7-star mugwort's turn to save the next generation of Mount One. Zhou-Yi, don't you think this is a kind of reincarnation?" The sadness on Zhang Canwen's face quickly faded, and he smiled brightly. He put the 7-star mugwort on Wang Li's chest and said to me, "It's up to you now." I took a deep breath and nodded. I sat down by the bed and reached out to hold Wang Li's wrist. To be honest, I was very nervous right now. The 7-star mugwort wasn't easy to obtain. If anything went wrong, there wouldn't be a second 7-star mugwort for me to use. On the other side, Wang Kun, his wife, and Wang Yongjun were also looking at me nervously. Wang Kun's wife even closed her eyes tightly and put her palms together on her chest. She kept muttering to herself and didn't even dare to look in my direction. I turned my head and silently urged the shaman energy in my body to slowly flow into Wang Li's body. Wang Li was very quiet. He blinked his big eyes at me as if he didn't know what I was planning to do. From time to time, he would raise his hand and slap it on the edge of the bed, making Wang Yongjun, who was behind me, breathe rapidly. I looked at Wang Li without blinking and held my breath at the same time. I let the shaman energy circulate in my body to make it gentler. Then, I slowly increased the amount of shaman energy I infused. A dark green light also appeared on little Wang Li's body. It flowed along with the increase of my shaman qi and true essence. When the dark green light touched the 7-star mugwort, the 7 stars on the 7-star mugwort suddenly lit up and gave off a sweet fragrance. At the same time, I felt something else. I could faintly feel a gentle power slowly flowing out of the 7-star mugwort and seeping into little Wang Li's body. I controlled the shaman energy and slowly infused it into Wang Li's body. At the same time, my other hand slowly condensed the Tao energy. I was wary of the evil spirit in Wang Li's body. Although the evil spirit hadn't awakened yet, I understood that if I did anything that would threaten his descent into this world, the evil spirit would react immediately. The shaman qi in my body continuously flowed into little Wang Li's body. It was hard to imagine that such a tiny infant's body could actually withstand the enormous power of my heavenly master realm. Not to mention an ordinary adult, even a cultivator who had just reached glory realm would explode from such power. However, little Wang Li didn't show any signs of discomfort. He continued to blink his eyes at me, as though he didn't feel anything at all. After a few minutes, I could clearly feel the resistance. Little Wang Li seemed to have finally felt that something was wrong. He became restless, and his chubby little hands waved more frequently. This was the moment I had failed the last time. The last time I had tried to use shaman energy to help Wang Li expel the evil spirit, I had encountered increasing resistance. At that time, my cultivation wasn't high enough and I couldn't supply so much shaman energy. Now that I had become a sky master, the shaman energy in my body had become shaman energy. No matter the quality or quantity, it was completely different from before. I didn't believe that I couldn't beat that evil spirit this time. Feeling the increasing resistance, I took a deep breath and slowly increased the speed of infusing the shaman energy in my hand. As time goes by, the resistance I'll face will become greater and greater. It seems that the more witchcraft energy I send in, the more resistance there will be. Chapter 561. Hearing Zhang Canwen's reminder, my heart stirred. I quickly urged my witchcraft energy to feel the mysterious power of the 7-star mugwort. The 7-star mugwort's energy had already mixed with my witchcraft energy. I effortlessly controlled it and tried to use the 7-star mugwort's energy to touch the black spot. I vaguely felt that the pressure that had been blocking me had loosened a little. It was as if the pressure that had been blocking me was an iceberg, and my witchcraft energy was a sharp blade. I couldn't pierce through the 1,000-year-old mysterious ice at all. Now, the 7-star mugwort's power was like a flame, burning the sharp blade of my witchcraft energy red. When I poked the 1,000-year-old mysterious ice again, the surrounding ice gradually melted, and I slowly poked it in. Feeling this, I was immediately excited. I mobilized more witchcraft energy, trying to disperse the resistance of the 1,000-year-old mysterious ice in one go. After I had increased my strength, the resistance force in the dent increased. After a while, I felt a cold and gloomy aura trying to resist it. I was shocked. If I disturbed this evil creature now, it would be difficult to deal with it. After thinking for a moment, I slowed down the speed at which I infused my witchcraft energy. At the same time, I thought quickly in my head. This evil creature's aura was terrifying. If I rashly disturbed it, it would counterattack. It would be a small matter if Zhang Canwen and I were hurt, but it would be troublesome if little Wang Li was hurt. However, I couldn't keep wasting time like this. I frowned. Although I had the cultivation base of a celestial master, I still felt that the evil energy in the black spot was endless. If I kept wasting time, I would be the first to be exhausted. At that time, it wouldn't end well. Instead of wasting it fruitlessly, it was better to take a gamble and concentrate all the power of Wizard Chi. With the help of the 7-star mugwort, he might as well go all out and try to cut off the connection between the evil thing in the black spot and little Wang Li before it alarmed the evil thing. Zhang Canwen had said that Jingyi school had a way to kill and expel evil creatures. Now that I had the cultivation base of a celestial master, I could give it a try. I took a deep breath, and the shaman energy in my body gushed out, pouring into little Wang Li's body. It formed an ink-colored giant sword that wrapped the power of the 7-star mugwort and slashed into the depths of the black speckled dent. Just as I made my move, little Wang Li's body suddenly shook and his eyes turned purple. The evil being was reacting. When I had decided to try to cut off the evil spirit, I had already made preparations. At this moment, the arrow was knocked on the bowstring and had to be released. I gritted my teeth and exerted my strength. More and more shaman energy rushed into little Wang Li's body without reservation. The huge shaman energy sword became even more terrifying. After I had gathered all the shaman energy in my body, I controlled the huge shaman energy sword and slashed at the black speckled dent. It collided with the evil spirit power that had suddenly erupted from the dent. As soon as the two forces collided, they weren't able to determine the victor, and they collided with each other. My huge shaman energy sword had gathered all the shaman energy in my body. It would have been fine if I had succeeded in the first slash, but after the collision, I didn't have any follow-up support. Conversely, the evil spirit energy within the crater seemed to be endless, and it gathered more and more. In the beginning, it was only burning with the enormous shaman energy sword, but after a short moment, it exploded out with a bang and pushed the enormous shaman energy sword out. The power of the 7-star mugwort that wrapped around the huge shaman energy sword seemed to have lost its effect at this moment. As the huge shaman energy sword retreated, little Wang Li's body began to twitch, and his eyes became more and more purple. At this critical moment, I used the astral steps and desperately triggered the shaman energy that the dead Tai Sui's body had forcibly poured into other parts of my body and continued to pour it into the huge shaman energy sword. With the follow-up support, the momentum of the huge shaman energy sword being pushed out temporarily slowed down. However, after my supporting shaman energy was slightly delayed, the evil spirit power burst out again. The huge shaman energy sword was forced to retreat, and there was no way to resist it at all. In despair, I found that the evil spirit power didn't seem to have an upper limit. When I was still in the glory of knowledge realm, it had used the power of the glory of knowledge realm to stop me. Now that I had become a heavenly master, the power that could stop me had also become at the heavenly master level. No matter how much force I used, the evil spirit power in the dent seemed to be boundless. What should I do? I was sweating all over. If I failed this time and triggered the evil spirit power to fully erupt, little Wang Li would really be consigned to eternal damnation. Zhang Canwen seemed to see the current situation. He solemnly stared at little Wang Li, his face pale. Suddenly, he shouted at me, "Withdraw all your shaman energy, and only use the power of the 7-star mugwort to resist." I was stunned, but there was no other way. After a moment of hesitation, I chose to believe in Zhang Canwen. I gritted my teeth and instantly withdrew the shaman energy that I had sent into the dent. The strange thing was that as I withdrew my shaman energy, the evil spirit power in the dent dissipated a lot. Only a small part of it was still surging up, as if it was about to explode. However, at this moment, after losing the restraints of the shaman energy, the 7-star mugwort's power completely erupted. It turned into a silver light that flowed out of the dent and quickly flowed through little Wang Li's body, occupying 7 acupoints from head to toe. After the 7-star mugwort's power lingered on little Wang Li's acupoints, the black dent was also illuminated by the silver light. The remaining evil spirit power was like snow meeting the scorching sun, quickly melting and disappearing. After the evil spirit's power was completely dispelled, the silver light slowly dissipated and fell on the 4 walls of the black mottled dent, forming a layer of light silver film. With the formation of this film, little Wang Li's body gradually calmed down, and his eyes gradually became clear. The creepy purple color from before could no longer be seen. I wiped my sweat and stood up, asking Zhang Canwen, "Brother Zhang, how is it?" Zhang Canwen's pale face eased a lot. He exhaled and nodded at me. "It's hard to say. Let me see." Then, he reached out his hand and gently pressed his finger on little Wang Li's forehead, closing his eyes. At this time, I couldn't help much. I could only stand aside and watch in silence. At this moment, Wang Yongjun was the first to approach me. His voice carried a hint of joy as he asked me, "Mr. Zhou, does this mean that he's cured? I can see that the color of the dent on Wang Li's body has faded a lot. Many parts of his body look the same as ordinary skin." "I'm not sure yet. We have to see what Brother Zhang says." I shook my head, but I still looked a little nervous. The dent looked a lot better, but when I used my shaman energy to fight against the evil spirit, I lost miserably. After a while, Zhang Canwen stopped and stood up. He turned to look at us and said, "I have good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first?" The smile on Wang Yongjun's face froze. He hurriedly asked, "Why is there bad news?" "It looks so much better. It's really much better." Zhang Canwen sighed. "Just now, Zhou Yi and I tried to cut off the connection between the evil spirit in the dent and little Wang Li, but we didn't succeed. We almost caused the evil spirit to break out of seclusion in advance. Fortunately, the power of the 7-star mugwort herb is extraordinary. In the end, it temporarily suppressed the evil spirit in the passage and formed a barrier. It can protect little Wang Li for at least a year." Wang Yongjun wasn't a metaphysician, so he didn't quite understand what Zhang Canwen had said. But now that he knew that little Wang Li was safe for the time being, the worry on his face faded a little. I was puzzled and asked Zhang Canwen, "When I tried to use my shaman energy to kill it, the power of the evil spirit in the passage was completely beyond my expectations." Zhang Canwen smiled bitterly and nodded. "I'm afraid that our previous guess was wrong. This evil spirit is too strong. Even with the cultivation of a celestial master and the help of the 7-star mugwort herb, we can't expel it." I nodded. I had also noticed that earlier. After thinking for a while, I asked him again, "What kind of cultivation do you think is needed to expel it?" Zhang Canwen was silent for a moment before answering, "At least the cultivation of a young god celestial master." Young god celestial master. In the metaphysics world, there were very few young god celestial masters. But with my aptitude, this realm wasn't a fantasy. It was just that the power of the 7-star mugwort herb could only protect little Wang Li for a year. How could a year be enough for me to advance to a young god celestial master? Let's take it one step at a time. Zhang Canwen looked at me with my head lowered in silence. He sighed with a helpless expression. "This is the best method I can think of now. Who knows, we might find another method after a year." I nodded. Zhang Canwen was right. Now we could only take it one step at a time. To be honest, I had no confidence in advancing to a young god celestial master within a year. "Big brother Zhang, no matter what, my son can live for another year, right?" Just as the two of us were depressed, Wang Kuan, who had been standing quietly by the side and watching us, suddenly spoke. "That's right." Zhang Canwen was stunned for a moment before answering casually. "I'm already very grateful to you." Wang Kuan first bowed deeply to Zhang Canwen, then bowed to me and said sincerely, Little Master Zhou, Master Zhang, I'm already very grateful that you're willing to do so much for my son." As he spoke, Wang Kuan's eyes reddened and he couldn't continue. He probably knew in his heart that if there was no change in this 1 year, little Wang Li's final outcome would still be the same. All parents in the world were pitiful. Watching their child walk towards death step by step with their own eyes, no one would be in a good mood. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became heavy. Looking at Wang Kuan and his wife, who were choking with sobs, I couldn't say anything. I smiled wryly and glanced at Zhang Kanwan. I left him here to comfort Wang Kuan and walked out. I slowly paced in the corridor alone and looked blankly in front of me. I didn't feel good in my heart. No matter what, I managed to stabilize little Wang Li for a year. But in the face of a more unpredictable future, I couldn't be happy no matter what. As I walked, I subconsciously walked to the outside of the fat man's room. I paused for a moment before pushing the door open and walking in. The fat man seemed to be woken up by the sound of my entrance. He opened his eyes and struggled to turn his head. He squeezed out a smile and asked me, "You killed that bastard Lu Zhenyang? How is that possible?" I smiled wryly and sat down by his bed. I said slowly, "He's a young god celestial master. With my strength that has just entered the celestial master realm, it's impossible to kill him." Then, I told him what happened after the fat man fainted. The fat man nodded and looked a little down. "My monster refining gourd is also in his hands?" I was speechless for a moment and smiled wryly. "Yes, but there's no other way. If there's a chance in the future, I'll definitely get it back for you." The fat man also knew that I was comforting him. He chuckled and didn't continue the topic. "What about little Wang Li? How is he? Did you use the 7-star mugwort?" "No." I sighed and said, "I extended his life for another year." "Just extended his life for another year?" The fat man repeated my words. It was obvious that he understood. Chapter 562. Little Wang Li's matter had come to an end. The final outcome wasn't much different from what Zhang Kanwan had envisioned, which was to use the 7-star mugwort to prolong Wang Li's life for 1 year. The only difference was that the Heavenly Master's true essence couldn't completely solve this problem. He had to cultivate until he reached the Yang God Heavenly Master level. As for whether I could reach the Yang God Heavenly Master level after 1 year, I didn't know what to do at that time. I didn't want to think about it, so I didn't want to think about it anymore. I focused on consolidating my cultivation base and made some talismans for emergencies. Even at the Heavenly Master level, there weren't many ways to fight. They were just true essence spells, talismans, and treasures. I was a person who cherished my life. After cultivating for so many years, I had never stopped using talismans, which were foreign objects that could be used in an instant. I made several sets of all the talismans I knew how to make. I also gave Zhang Kanwan and Fatty a few to save their lives. I kept a few for myself, and put the rest into Xiang Lu's leather bag. This time, the yellow paper and cinnabar used to draw the talismans were of the highest quality. I just mentioned it casually, and Wang Yongjun ordered his men to deliver them to me the next day. It had been a long time since I had experienced the feeling of financial distress in the secular world. When I first entered the path of cultivation, I felt pained because of 1 or 2 pieces of yellow paper. Now that I thought about it, it was so far away that I couldn't remember it clearly. Since I had nothing to do, I decided to stay in Shenzhen. I meditated and cultivated every day, watching the sun rise from the horizon in the east to the mountains in the west. Just like that, a day passed. There was an indescribable tranquility in my heart. I suddenly understood why the ancient cultivators liked to cultivate in seclusion. Without the disturbance of the secular world, they could become one with heaven and earth. It was a kind of cleansing and settling of their cultivation base and mind. At first, Wang Yongjun came to me several times and invited me to dinner. He wanted to introduce some rich people to me. After I rejected him several times, he didn't mention it again. I wasn't trying to humiliate him. Although Wang Yongjun was a mortal without any cultivation, he still settled a lot of things for me with his great influence in the mortal world. It was indeed a lot more convenient. To me, Wang Yongjun was an extremely important friend. I just didn't want and didn't need to associate with those people. Feng Shui Master has always been inseparable from rich businessmen and dignitaries. This is not because Feng Shui Master is greedy for money. It is really that the practice needs a lot of materials and must be supported. This is not a shameful thing. Just like ordinary people work, they all rely on their own ability to eat. If I was still in the earthly adept realm, I would have to prepare for a rainy day. Even if I was unwilling, I would have to do something like gathering wealth. However, now that I have the cultivation of a celestial adept, the wealth of the secular world has lost its meaning to me. In terms of cultivation, I do not need too many resources. What I need more is to comprehend the heavenly Tao. Therefore, if he had the time, he might as well meditate and cultivate. Adding a trace of true essence was also a good thing. I didn't know when it started, but I had a feeling that I had transcended the mortal world. Come to think of it, it was probably after I became a celestial adept. Before becoming a celestial adept, I had always regarded myself as a special, ordinary person. But now I had a subconscious feeling that I was above everyone else. Vaguely, I no longer felt like an ordinary person. A celestial adept could fly with his body, and his Tao energy and true essence were boundlessly mysterious. How could he be so different from the ordinary people in the mortal world? The so-called cultivation was actually a way to advance to a higher level. Perhaps the gods and devils in the legends were actually creatures of a higher level. This is just my guess, and I can't find the answer. Perhaps in the future, when I reach a higher realm, I will know the answer to these questions. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. Since the Hungry Ghost Festival was coming in a little more than a month, I decided to go back to my hometown to worship the ancestors. I only needed to go back during the Hungry Ghost Festival. However, I hadn't been back to my hometown for some time, and I hadn't seen Fatty and Uncle Lin for a long time. It would be better for me to go back and stay in my hometown for a while. After making up my mind, I informed Fatty. These days, Fatty's life was much more interesting than mine. He and Wang Yongjun went to most of the dinner parties that I had declined. His divination skills were indeed suitable for this kind of occasion. Just a little bit of it was enough to make those rich merchants who had been fooled by swindlers prostrate themselves before him. In Fatty's own words, they were looking at him as if he was a deity. After listening to my plan, Fatty's eyes flashed with a gleam of nostalgia. He didn't want to stay in this prosperous place. He nodded and agreed. These days I've been thinking about going back to my hometown. I didn't expect that I would mention it to you first. Cultivators could sense the heavenly path, and their thoughts were all predestined. Fatty and I had the thought of going back to our hometown. Perhaps it was a sign that something would happen after we returned to our hometown. Of course, it was just a thought. I didn't really care about it. We packed our luggage and asked Wang Kun to help us book the plane tickets. Then we prepared to depart. But just as he was about to leave, something happened. I had a talisman on me that looked like a child's scribbling. The messy lines on the talisman contained an extremely mysterious power. There wasn't much power, but it was extremely intricate. It interacted with each other to form a small magic formation. This talisman wasn't used to control the enemy. It was a sound-transmitting talisman. It was a keepsake that Wang Kun had given me. When he wanted to contact me, this talisman would shine. Then, it would turn the message Wang Kun wanted to convey into a stream of Zhen Yuan. Then, I would receive his message from that stream of Zhen Yuan. When he gave me the yellow paper, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Nowadays, electronic communication was very advanced. It was more convenient for us to leave each other's phone numbers and contact each other directly. However, Wang Can insisted that I keep the talisman. He said that people in the blessed enclave used this kind of talisman to send messages. Moreover, the phone might not work all the time, but this talisman could be used anywhere as long as the user's true essence didn't run out. Since he was so insistent, I accepted the talisman. Anyway, it was just a piece of paper, and it didn't take up much space. I didn't expect that I would use it today. When the fatty and I were about to leave for the airport, I felt my body heat up. I felt something shiver. I took it out and found that it was the talisman. I took out the talisman, and the lines on it sparkled. Soon, it condensed into a small white bead. I recalled the method Officer Wang had taught me. I gathered a wisp of true qi at my fingertip and flicked it toward the bead. The bead paused for a moment. Then, it spun and turned into a white mist, gently falling into my hand. I held the white mist and closed my eyes. I then used my true essence to read the message in the mist. There was only one sentence on it. To the sage, Holy Spirit Guard Wang Can pays his respects. The Wanwu Wonderland sincerely invites the sage to come and observe the heavenly grand ritual. Third baby, what did Wang Can say? The fatty asked when he saw me close my eyes. He asked us to go to the Wanwu Wonderland. I opened my eyes and told him to participate in the heavenly grand ritual. What's that? The fatty was bewildered. He looked at me in bewilderment. It's a grand event there. Actually, I didn't know much about it. I recalled what Officer Wang had told me about the heavenly grand ritual. I tried to explain to the fatty. Officer Wang told me that there will be a competition at the heavenly grand ritual. So, it's a very important event? That should be the case. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent me a message. So, are we going back to our hometown? I was bewildered by the fatty's question. After thinking for a while, I answered, let's go to Wang Can's place first. There are still 2 months until the Zhongyuan festival, so we're not in a hurry to go back to our hometown. I heard from Wang Can that something troublesome was going to happen in the Wanwu Wonderland during the heavenly grand ritual. Since he sent me a message, we have to go there and check it out. The fatty had always listened to me since he was a kid. Seeing that I had made a decision, he immediately agreed. I asked Wang Yongjun to help us book new tickets. The Wanwu Wonderland was located on Mount Wanwu in Jiuan, Hunan Province. It was quite far from Shenzhen. As soon as we got on the plane, the fatty asked for a blanket, wrapped it around his body, and fell asleep. I couldn't help but smile wryly when I saw him sleeping so soundly. This fellow was still at the Earth Master realm. Before I had become a heavenly master, every time I got on a plane, I always felt flustered. I didn't know how he could adapt to the plane so well. Was it because he had a big heart and a big body? Of course, I didn't feel any discomfort now. However, I didn't sleep. Instead, I looked at the scenery outside the window and quietly comprehended. Meditating and adjusting one's breath were only a part of the Heavenly Master Realm's cultivation. More things needed to be comprehended. Literally speaking, the word comprehended didn't mean seeing more and thinking more. Although I couldn't explain the mysteries behind it, seeing more and thinking more was always beneficial. While looking at the magnificent scenery, I thought about the Wanwu Wonderland we would go to this time. I knew a little about the Wanwu Wonderland. According to the records, Mount Wanwu was located in the northwest of Hunan Province. It was connected to the Taihang Mountains in the east, the Zhongtiao Mountains in the west, the Taiyue Mountains in the north, and the Yellow River in the south. It could be said that it gathered the spiritual aura of the 4 directions. Since ancient times, it had been a famous blessed land. The holy land of the Chuanjian sect was Mount Wanwu. Apart from that, there was another rumor that interested me. According to the legends, Mount Wanwu was the place where the Yellow Emperor of the Xianyuan clan prayed to the heavens. As one of the ancestors of the Chinese civilization, The Yellow Emperor of the ancient times would come here every year to pray for good weather and for the people's health. That was why Wangu was also called the Temple of Heaven in ancient times. Of course, this Temple of Heaven wasn't the tourist attraction in the capital. Although they were both called the Temple of Heaven, they were thousands of miles apart. I thought about the Xianyuan sword sheath in my hands and wondered if I would encounter something related to my identity in my previous life on Wangwu Mountain. I was looking forward to it, but I was also a little scared. After getting off the plane, I didn't immediately contact Wang Li. Instead, I took the fatty to wander around Mount Wangwu. This place was the same as other famous mountains and rivers. It had many tourist attractions, such as balcony palaces and geological museums. Of course, I didn't want to go there to see them. Most of these attractions had been built by later generations, and some of them were fake. Of course, they didn't have a wisp of spiritual energy. I guessed this place wasn't the Wangwu Wonderland. After wandering around for half a day, the fatty became impatient. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and complained, "Why don't you contact Wang Can? Why are you wandering around here?" I wasn't in a hurry. Ever since I had learned about the heavenly wonderlands, I was very interested in them. If I called Wang Can to guide me, I would lose a lot of fun. It would be better to explore Mount Wangwu by myself. I wanted to see where the Wangwu Wonderland was. If I could find some clues, I would have some experience in searching for other heavenly wonderlands. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.